Okay, I know you guys have been asking for this for a while, but I am finally reviewing Alchemised. So Alchemised is a 1,040-page novel by SenLinYu, which was published in 2025, but actually started as Harry Potter fanfiction. Not just any Harry Potter fanfiction though. Draco Malfoy and Hermione, whatever her surname is, romance fanfiction. Now, I'm not a big Harry Potter fan. I think a lot of you all know this. I only read the series of books for the first time when I was like 23-ish or something like that. And like, I thought they were fine. They were okay. They were whatever. Like, maybe I was too old to appreciate them, but I found myself cringing quite a lot at like the racist character names and the cheesy, pun-filled naming conventions of everything like Diagon Alley. And also, like, how was anyone shocked that Lupin was a werewolf when his name's literally Lupin? Like, a lot of that stuff just felt kind of obvious. Like, maybe I was too old. Maybe I was too old. We'll go with that. All that as an aside, though, I'm also very much in the camp of not wanting to support anything J.K. Rowling does these days, because I'd rather not fund transphobia, obviously. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to say. That said, to the best of my knowledge, enough has been changed in Alchemised that it doesn't actually feature any Harry Potter characters, and Rowling is, to my best knowledge, not profiting in any way from this book, which is why I felt okay to buy a copy and review it. I will also add that even though you guys have been asking me to review it for a while, I seem to miss any like discussion of this book online for some reason, and so I went into reviewing this absolutely blind. And the way I'm doing this video today is a little bit different because, as you know, I quite like to write my scripts of these reviews as I go along, so I'm kind of taking you on the journey with me. You know, you're discovering the book as I do, and then at the end I give you like a summary of my thoughts and everything. So with this one, I decided because it's so damn long, I'm gonna split the videos up into part 1, part 2, and part 3, each referencing a part of the book, because the book itself is split into 3 parts. And at time of filming this, I haven't actually read the 3rd part yet. So my thoughts in this video are based purely on part 1, and then when we get to part 3, maybe some of my thoughts of this will change, and we'll address them when we come to it. So I'm really taking you on this journey with me. But yeah, going in, I knew nothing about the characters, the story. I didn't even know whether people thought this book was going to be good or bad. I just knew people had been asking me to review it, and I was like, I don't know if that's because it's going to be really good or really bad. I get both recommendations. So I just knew it's fantasy, people want me to cover it, and there's probably some romance in there since it's based on romance fan fiction, and that's about it. That's as far as my knowledge went. And then I saw that this won a British Book Award for the best sci-fi and fantasy book, and I was like, okay, I'm sold. It's got to be good. I'm reading this. And then it was not good, and I decided to make the video on it. Or at least it didn't start off good, so I figured I'd make the video on it. Now, this book opens with a content warning, which is something I always appreciate, and especially when a book covers the kind of dark topics that this one apparently does, and it does from what I've read so far. This warning at the start of the book tells you to go to the back of the book for the full list, which is fine by me. I'm okay with that. I'm not personally a fan of when a book's like, hey, go to this website and look here, and then click on this, and then do this, and then you might find content warnings, because I'm like, who has time to do all that when you're reading like a physical book? I'd rather they just be in the book, even if it's at the back of the book, but that's just a personal preference. So this book lists things like, well, it says, Alchemised is a work of dark fantasy containing wartime violence, religious abuse, depictions of complex trauma, suicidal ideation, self-harm, human experimentation, medical torture, eugenics, cannibalism, sexual assault, rape, and allusions to necrophilia. Please remember that depiction is not authorial endorsement. Because Alchemised is told in third-person limited point of view, it necessarily involves some distortions of vision, as well as missed or misconstrued events. Reader discretion is advised. So, as I've always said, I'm absolutely fine with books including and addressing these kinds of topics, so long as it's not done gratuitously and it is done considerately. I also feel like they need to be used with purpose and not just for shock value. Like, so these big things in here, like cannibalism, I'm like, well, does that add to the story? Is there a point to it? Or is it just to be shocking for the sake of being shocking? You know, I want these things to have a purpose and not just be like, I'm making it dark for the sake of being edgy. You know what I mean? And again, that line about depiction is not authorial endorsement. Again, I like that. I think that's a good thing, and that's something that we do need to separate. Just because an author writes about something, that doesn't mean they support that. However, there's a difference between an author writing something like, I'm writing a bad character who believes bad things, and I'm writing it in this way so you, the reader, can be critical of it, and an author who says, I'm writing characters who do bad things and I'm romanticizing it, and you should too. There is a difference in that for me, and I think that distinction is important, and one is okay and one isn't. So an example I often give is looking at a book like John Fowles' The Collector. That is written from a couple of different points of view, but one of them is from a guy who essentially stalks a woman, kidnaps her, locks her in his basement, and collects her, essentially. And obviously we see his point of view. He's not a very nice man. He is a bit deluded. He's very unreliable as a narrator, and we're seeing his delusions and why he's trying to justify this abhorrent behavior. But we know that the author's not endorsing that, and he's not writing this, for example, as a love story between a kidnapper and his victim, you know? It's very much meant to be something that is horrifying and exploring what makes people do these bad things and what are the effects on the victim and how would a victim try and get out of that situation and so on. Compare that to something like books I've reviewed on here before, like Haunting Adeline, which literally has like a man stalking a woman and, sorry, I'm just going to say raping her and sexually assaulting her repeatedly, and then her falling in love with him and it being portrayed as a love story. Both of those books have the points of view of people obsessed with someone, stalking someone, hurting someone, but one seems like an endorsement and one doesn't, you know? So while you can separate the characters and the authors, you do have to look at overall, what is the author's message here? And a general depiction of stalking and rape, for example, can be very well done, and it can be quite emotional, and it can be something that is not necessarily enjoyable to read, but like interesting to read and compelling to read, and it can make you think about things and so on, or it can be just kind of gratuitous and romanticizing and quite problematic. So again, author intent matters, author point of view matters, just the overall presentation of the topics does matter. Sorry, that was me going off on a rant on the side. Also, yeah, I'm always appreciative of when books label rape as rape and not just sex, which some might not consider consensual or non-consensual consent when they just mean rape. You know, call rape rape. I think that's a really important thing to do. We can't keep downplaying what rape is in general, in culture, in media, in literature, none of it. And I've kind of already spoken about this a little bit, but because I went on my rant there off script, but in my original script I wrote, my hope is that the author doesn't try and justify any of these sensitive topics, because one of my biggest hates in fiction is the romanticization and glamorization of, in particular, sexual violence. So, you know, if you write a character who rapes or is any of these other things, like pro-eugenics or into necrophilia, for example, I'm fine with that character being represented, being shown, even show me their point of view, that's fine. But don't try and get me to root for them as a protagonist or a love interest, you know? I don't think that's too much to ask for. Although you'd be surprised, in some books it is. Apparently, some people believe that means I'm not a real feminist because I'm not pro-rape in books, and other people say that I don't understand fiction is fiction, and I'm like, well, I do. I just think, you know, if something is contributing to overall rape culture, it deserves calling out a bit, you know? Anyway, I've ranted about those people before, let's not do it here. So, let's start talking about the book itself. The prologue starts with a woman, Helena. She is our main character, our protagonist. She's the one we follow through the story. She is in a stasis tank in the dark. She, for some reason, keeps being shocked by electricity to stimulate her muscles, but the problem is she's conscious this whole time, and apparently she shouldn't be. And that's basically the prologue. That is it. She's just in this stasis tank, in pain, being tortured. And you'll see this as a theme throughout the book so far. In the 600 pages of this book that I've read out of the 1,000 so far, Helena is just tortured repeatedly. This is just a book about her torture. So maybe it gets better towards the end. Maybe there's some sort of empowerment. Maybe she stops being tortured and fights back. But from what I read for 600 pages, it's just torture, torture, torture. And it's getting quite difficult to stomach. These scripts are taking me a really long time to write because this book is taking me a long time to read, because it's really hard to stomach a lot of the violence and abuse against women in particular. And also it's boring, which is making it really hard. So this is when part 1 of the book starts, and part 1 is what we're going to be looking at in this video. Chapter 1 opens with one of my least favourite things in fiction: excessive swearing in every line of dialogue, just for the sake of looking edgy and being like, hey guys, this is an adult book for adults because we swear. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to swearing. I'm not personally much of a swearer myself, but I really don't mind when other people do it, and I don't have a problem with seeing it just generally in books or film, TV, or anything like that. I don't mind it in media in general, but I can't help but feel like if you need to punctuate every single line of dialogue with a crap ton of swearing, then maybe you're lacking the ability to express yourself effectively. Like, if you're gonna use swearing in dialogue, use it sparingly, use it for emphasis. Like, maybe you show a character finally snaps when they swear for the first time, like, you know, something like that. I don't need a, ooh, and then we effing did this and we effing did that, what you effing doing, you effing, like, it's just, it feels unnecessary to me, and it kind of, it comes across as juvenile at a point, you know, like a teenage boy trying to convince the world they're grown up now because they swear. Thankfully, though, the swearing seems to come in like little chunks. So there's a lot in this first bit, and then there's a lot in other little sections, but it's not quite throughout the book. So this isn't like a, I think it's Colleen Hoover who swears a lot in her books, and it's like, oh, and then we have, or something. Is it Colleen Hoover? I can't remember. I know the author of Haunting Adeline had like excessive swearing for no reason. But I searched through all this book and there aren't, thankfully, half as many swear words as I thought there were going to be. But honestly, this was not the first impression to the book or the author's writing style for me personally. But I know some people might like it, so that's okay. So whoever is keeping Helena in stasis realizes she's actually awake when the light came, it nearly split Helena's brain open. There was screaming. F, how's this one awake? A voice broke through the sensory agony. F this stasis gel. Can't get a decent grip. Make her shut up. She's about to drown herself. How the F is she awake? Someone must have F'd the dosage on this one. Don't let her crawl off. She tore herself free, forcing her eyes open. All she could make out was blinding white. She lunged towards it. You effing bitch, you cut me. Pain exploded across the back of her head. So in the first 4 lines of dialogue in this 1,000-page book, we get 5 F words and a bitch. I feel like we should put that on merch. Just 5 F words and a bitch. Anyway, Helena, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Is it Helena? Is it Helena? I keep saying both, so I'll probably keep saying both in this video. But she gets knocked out again, like immediately. And this is where we're playing the first drinking game of this book. Especially in part 1, every time Helena gets knocked unconscious, drink. Gonna warn you though, don't do this with alcohol because you will get alcohol poisoning and die. In part 2 of the book, it's not every time Helena gets knocked unconscious, but every time she sleeps or falls unconscious. It's both of them in the second part. So many scenes seem to end not with like a sensible ending point, but with, and then Helena fell asleep, and then Helena was unconscious. It's absolutely wild. Anyway, when she comes around again, there's the men who were there the first time she woke up, and a new woman, and we just get a repeat of the scene we just read. Like, this book is so full of repetition, it's crazy. And she was conscious when you opened the tank? Sure was. Started screaming when we lifted the top and pulled her up. Gave me a heart attack, I can tell you. Willems was so startled he nearly drowned her. And when we did get her out, she was effing feral. Scratched the S out of me until we knocked her out. Had the intravenous and all, but the sedation was turned off. Someone must have bumped it. And we know all this because we literally just read it on the page. You don't need to recap the events to another character that we already just saw. Frustrating. I can see why this book is so long if it's just going to keep repeating the same things over and over. So annoying. However, we do go on to get some new information in that she's the only one awake, a lot of other people have died in stasis, and she's an anomaly because strangely they don't have any records for her. So who is she? Why is she here? How did she get here in the first place? Questions. The woman says, you were right to call this in, it's anomalous. Let me know how many of the rest wake. Any corpses intact enough for reanimation go to the mines, the living stock goes to the outpost. And then to Helena she says, so prisoner 1273, or are you prisoner 19819? You have 2 inmate numbers and there's no record of either in this facility. Do you happen to have a name? Helena said nothing. Now that the mere concept of light was not a terror, she could think a little. She was still a captive. But Helena won't speak, and at that point I think it's pretty understandable really. Well, she either can't or won't speak. Either way, understandable. And we're also clearly opening this book with a little bit of slavery. Lovely. Well, I thought it was slavery. Turns out it's like necromancy slavery, so that's fun. And then Helena's knocked out again. So we're 5 pages into the ebook and she's already been knocked unconscious twice. If I keep doing this with a caffeinated drink like Monster, I'm not going to sleep for a month at this rate. When she wakes up the next time, she is on a bed, she's in shackles, and a mystery woman gives us a nice little info dump which sets up a mystery around Helena. Helena Marino, you, there was a sound of shuffled pages, should be dead according to your 1273 file. You were marked for culling due to unspecified extensive injuries, but the 19819 designation means you were selected for stasis. More pages were shuffled. However, there's no record that you ever arrived there or underwent processing. The woman sucked her teeth. You've not existed anywhere in our file system since August of last year, 14 months. And now we find you in the very stasis warehouse you never arrived at. How is that? Helena blinked slowly, trying to process the information. 14 months? Obviously no one can survive in stasis that long. Even at 6 months with perfect conditions, it's nearly impossible. And you weren't even stored properly. So where did you come from? Where did you go? No. Where did you come from and who put you there? Helena turned her head away, refusing to answer. There wasn't anyone left to protect, but she refused to cooperate with her captors to make anything easy for them, even their filing system. The thing that I want to point out here, especially in that last bit, is the writing style. Is anyone else sick of this weird trend in so much modern fiction where sentence fragments are presented as whole sentences? Look at that last sentence. To make anything easy for them, even their filing system, is not a complete sentence. Like, and this is just a pet peeve. Like, I get that sometimes you might want to use incomplete fragments to make speech or narration seem kind of scattered or choppy or intense, but using it here does nothing more than using a comma would do. At least using a comma would be grammatically correct, you know? She refused to cooperate with her captors to make anything easy for them, or she refused to cooperate with her captors or make anything easy for them, even their filing system. But that on its own, to make anything easy for them, is not a complete sentence, and that really annoys me. I've noticed authors like Frida McFadden do this a lot too, and it always kind of takes me out of a book because it makes no sense at all. And I'm like, I know you want us to pause here, but that's why we use a comma. Or are editors not picking up on this stuff anymore? Do they not care? Do people? I don't know. I know grammar and language can change over time as our understandings change, and that's how, like, it sounds silly, but looking at like internet memes and jokes and stuff is a really good example of this, of seeing how language can change. One person makes a joke here and it spreads and spreads and spreads, and now suddenly this like random collection of words has a whole new meaning that it normally wouldn't, or it didn't 5-10 years ago, and yet it does now. And I get that in language and books we can do the same thing, and you might be like, well, so many people do it now and so many people understand it that it makes sense. And just because it makes sense, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily correct and that there isn't a better way to express it more clearly. You know, I don't know, I'm rambling again, sorry. Going off script here. I mean, I do find it funny because I found one of the biggest struggles I'm having with my own writing. And I'm writing my first novel at the minute, and I've been working on it for like a year now. And it's slow progress, but I'm really enjoying the process and I'm putting a lot of time and effort into it. And one of the things I'm struggling with is that I am personally such a fan of writing in these long, complex sentences with embedded clauses that I know I absolutely overuse them. And I need to stop doing that. Like, I'm purposely making an effort to vary my sentence length a bit, to make my prose flow better, to play around with the rhythm of my writing and mix, you know, these short, simple sentences with the longer, more complex ones and find a good balance between them, and also not just overcomplicate things for the sake of it, you know. But I feel like this book has kind of the opposite problem in that there are too many short sentences, rarely any complex sentences, and there are sentences so short they're not even sentences. They're just random clauses with like a full stop, but not even a full clause. It's like just random little phrases with a full stop, you know? It's frustrating. I mean, don't get me wrong, right? There's some instances where this works and it's clearly a stylistic thing. So for example here, where were you before stasis? The woman was speaking loudly. So at this point, with the full stops, with the do, 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 you can imagine her speaking loudly, slowly, almost condescending. Where were you before stasis? It annoys me a little bit because I kind of want a full stop in the before stasis there, but I also kind of understand why it's not. It just feels a little inconsistent and odd. But here, you've got those full stops with a reason, for a point, you know, being like, where were you? You know, it's slow, condescending, angry, you know? Whereas just, what was the other one? To make anything easy for them, even their filing system. That's a narrator, so it doesn't necessarily, it's like an omniscient narrator. So the choice of grammar in that phrase doesn't have a purpose. It's not trying to convey a certain tone or way of speaking, because this is like an omniscient narrator, right? So it's not really there with a purpose, it's just bad grammar. And that's what annoys me. Right, we get more backstory and world building. Before the warehouse, she'd been captured along with everyone else, crammed into cages outside the Alchemy Tower, where all the prisoners had been brought so they could witness the celebrations of the war's end. She could still smell the smoke and blood in the summer heat, hear the raucous cheers as resistance leaders died, their screams fading. Watching them die and knowing it was still not over even then. Some necromancer in the crowd would hurry forward, eager to show off, and in a matter of seconds that dead body would get up again. Someone Helena had trusted or served under brought back with reanimation. A necrothrall, an empty automaton corpse. They'd be slit open, their skin in ribbons, organs excised, eyes blank, face slack, and they would be used to kill the next traitor in an even more brutal way. The executions had not stopped until the air was red with a mist of blood. General Titus Bayard's body was used to kill his wife, slowly making him eat the strips of her as he cut them off. So there's our first instance of cannibalism. Sadly not our last. Disgusting. I feel conflicted about the inclusion of this in here because like I say, I want dark things used with a purpose. If, for example, I'm trying to think of a place where it would actually make sense. I get that it's kind of showing the barbaric nature of the the bad side, the one against the resistance. Although we'll talk about how stupid a name the resistance is in a second. You have like the good guys and the bad guys, right? So in Harry Potter fanfiction, this started off as wait, I've googled this, the Death Eaters and the Order of the Phoenix. Order of the Phoenix is a good guy, or are the good guys, and they're the side Helena's on. And in this, they're called the Resistance, or they have some other names. I think the Order of the Eternal Flame, something like that. And then the bad guys, who are like necromancers, are meant to be the Death Eaters. And I don't know if they've got like an official name in this. I still can't figure that out. But I'm just calling them bad guys, right? So I guess part of this is saying, hey, the bad guys are really, really bad because they're making a man who's already dead reanimate himself and eat his wife. I get that. I get that, like, show us he's bad, or show us they're bad, show us they're depraved. But it still feels a bit gratuitous and like shocking for the sake of being shocking rather than actually adding to the plot, you know? God, I'm going on so many tangents today, sorry. I'm 5 pages into my script and I've already gone off on so many tangents. Whoops. Okay, so the woman who is there when Helena wakes up, she uses magic to torture Helena until she talks, and we learn Helena managed to nod shakily. She should have realised the woman was a Vivimancer, necromancy's inverse twin, wielded on the living rather than the dead. I was like, I don't know what this means, but okay. Vivimancer comes up a lot. I had to, in the end, Google what it meant, because just saying the opposite of necromancy, I was, what does that even mean? We'll get there, don't worry, I'll explain it. And then the woman tries to use magic on her again to do, I don't know, something, we don't really know what. And the woman panics because something has been done to your mind, the woman said, sounding bewildered but also strangely excited. Some kind of transmutation. I've never encountered anything like it. I'm gonna have to report this. I'll need a specialist. You have, the woman paused. There's no name for this. I'll have to come up with a name. She seemed to be talking mostly to herself. Transmutational barriers inside a brain. How is that possible? There are patterns in it. This is elaborate, beautiful, professional work. A Vivimancer manually rewiring the human consciousness. Helena lay there not understanding. Me too, Helena. Me too. So she looks into Helena's head with like a magic screen, and the technology in this book makes no sense. This book feels like one big anachronism. So she looks into Helena's head with a magic screen and explains, I doubt you understand any of this. Same. But imagine your mind is a city. Your thoughts run along various streets to reach their destinations. Those lines you see are your streets that have been rerouted. There are barriers transmutationally crafted, and so instead of following a natural pattern through the brain, someone has created alternative routes. Some areas are cut off entirely. I can't even imagine how. The skill this would take. And this is why Helena can't remember anything, and she doesn't remember like the last 2 years of her life. She doesn't remember how she got in the stasis chamber or anything like that. But the woman also says she's foreign and an alchemy student, and then in a convenient turn of events, the woman's eyebrows furrowed, and she studied Helena more carefully. Wait. I remember hearing about you. You're that little savant the Holdfast sponsored. That must have been more than a decade ago. So you must be what, 20-something now? Then there's more world info dumping. Helena has these green bands around her wrists, which have been put there after her side lost the war. And her mentor or sponsor, or I don't really know who it is, but her side's leader was killed, and these green bands are... So it says, inside the stasis tank, she'd been constantly aware of them clamped around her wrists. Their existence had persisted along the edge of her consciousness, an inescapable presence that stifled her resonance, preventing any transmutational manipulation that might have let her escape. Even in the tank, she could feel the lumithium inside them. By its nature, lumithium bound the 4 elements of air, water, earth, and fire together, and in that binding, resonance was created. The sacred faith held that resonance was a gift intended by Sol, godhead of the elemental quintessence, to elevate humanity. Resonance was a rare ability in many parts of the world, but not in Sol's chosen nation of Palladia. The pre-war census had estimated nearly a fifth of the population possessed memorable resonance levels. The number had been expected to rise further with the next generation. Usually, resonance was channeled into the alchemy of metals and inorganic compounds, allowing for transmutation or alchemization. However, in a defective soul which rebelled against Sol's natural laws, the resonance could be corrupted, enabling vivimancy, like what the woman had used on Helena, and the necromancy used to create necrothralls. As the elements of resonance, lumithium could increase or even create resonance in inert objects through exposure, making them alchemically malleable. However, pure lumithium was too divine for mortals. Overexposure caused wasting sickness, and for individuals with resonance, direct exposure could result in raw, metallic pain within their nerves. But the cuff she's wearing means she can't use her magic or resonance, and that means all she knew was that as long as those manacles remained locked in place, she wasn't an alchemist at all. And that's the end of chapter 1. I was so confused by all this. It felt very heavy and info dumpy, but I didn't feel like we were getting good explanations. Now, having read more of the book, I'm understanding it a little bit more, and I'm going to try and explain it to you. So, there's a place called Palladia, and that is surrounded by other lands or countries, I think. I might be wrong. This is just what I'm understanding so far. It's also messy and hard to follow. So you get Palladia in the middle, and that's surrounded by like other lands and countries and islands. Helena is from one of the southern islands, and she was brought here because she's got magic, and it's not normal that those people have magic, but in Palladia, about a fifth of the people have magic. Magic here is called resonance. Resonance can be used to do things like manipulate metals. Like if you have like a metal knife, you can change it into a sword and stuff like that, and you can manipulate these metals with it. Some people also have, I think, elemental powers. Like one of the main guys who's in charge of the resistance and who used to rule Palladia is called Luc, and he has fire power. So far, we haven't seen anyone with air, earth, or water power, but maybe they exist, maybe they don't, I don't know. There's also these powers that people can use to manipulate humans and organic matter, and that's called vivimancy and necromancy. Necromancy, like they're two sides of the same coin, I think. Vivimancy can be used to do things like heal people or manipulate brains and emotions and that sort of thing. Necromancy can be used to reanimate dead corpses, I think. Right. What she's found is that she's wearing these like manacles or bracelets, and these are stopping her from using any magic. So she can't use magic while she's wearing them, and she can feel one of the elements in them is an element that usually enables magic, but it's combined with something to prevent her from using magic. And that's where we're at so far. This book does not do a good job of explaining any of this stuff well, and we get bits and pieces in this like really scattergun method, and I'm slowly starting to put it together. I complain about this more later, but the world building in this is not done in a enjoyable or easy to understand way. I'll give you some examples later of books that do that well, but this one does not. So by the end of chapter 1, so far we know nothing about Helena and her personality really. We know she used to be gifted, she was good at magic, she used to do magic and went to like an alchemy institute. She's an immigrant. We know her brain's been altered, but we don't know what it was altered to or from. We know she's a prisoner after a war. We know that the people who won the war seem to be evil sadists who practice necromancy and make people eat each other, but we don't know at this point what the war was about, what they were fighting for, or who the other side was. We assume, I think, that like Helena's side are meant to be the good guys, but after reading more of this book, I don't think there's any good guys in this. I don't think this was a good guys versus bad guys war. This was a bad guys versus bad guys war. That's just my opinion though. But we still know nothing about Helena, her personality, her values. She's just been like lying there while people talk at her and like being unconscious and then awake and then unconscious and then in pain and awake and unconscious, and people talked at her. And this is basically the whole first part of this book. It's things happening to Helena and at Helena and near Helena, but Helena doesn't do anything. She's not an active participant in the first part of this book at all. And so far in the second part of the book, she's not very active either. I'll just say that. So at the start of chapter 2, we find out that the people who currently have her captured, oh, I got their name now. They're called the Undying, right? That's with a capital U, the Undying. I keep forgetting their name. Helena calls some of them lichers, but apparently that's a slur and they're not allowed to say it anymore, but they go by the Undying overall. So the woman, we still don't know her name or anything about her. She's left wherever Helena is, and Helena's chained up, and then some other woman comes in called Grace, and she says she knows Helena because she was an orderly in the hospital. What hospital? We don't know. Turns out Helena used to work in a hospital, but we don't know when that was or where that was or why that was. Grace has a bunch of scars on her face, and she says, the Undying didn't do this. She gestured at her face. We did it ourselves. The Undying can do anything they want to us, to anyone labelled resistance. It's a thing nowadays to keep greys instead of staff. Other times they just want something to play with. At a party or after a night out, her face twisted. No one interferes. Even the ones who aren't Undying or in the guilds will go along with it because they all hope it'll give them a better chance of earning immortality too. Grace gave a jerky, stilted shrug. But if you're messed up looking, they won't keep you for long. She drew a shaky breath and then peered hard at Helena. So, from what I could tell here, Grace used to be part of the resistance, and she's now like a prisoner of war. Well, not a prisoner of war. I don't know. Maybe she is a prisoner of war. I don't know. It's never really explained. But they do this thing like in self-defense where they hurt themselves and scar themselves to make themselves look less attractive, so they're less likely to be raped. It's very dark. Again, it's not really clear who or what the Greys are, but I assumed they were captured members of the Resistance, and that's the group Helena was a part of. I still don't really know what Greys are. I don't think that's been explained yet. I don't know. So, in my original script here, I said, so far there's been a fair bit of info dumping, but I still feel very confused about how the magic works, how society is structured, who these groups of people actually are, and what they're fighting over. This is a very long book though, and I'm really hoping that it builds on this more and starts to make more sense and feel more developed. It does get developed more, but it's still not explained well. I really struggle with this book. There's a few things where I've literally had to be like, what the hell did I just read? And then like go and look it up in the wiki for the book, because I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to say. And this book actually made me feel stupid at times. I was like, am I just too stupid to understand this? Or is it really this poorly written? And I've had to go away and like read some good books and like assure myself, you're not dumb, don't worry. Like, you're not stupid, you're not losing your brain power. So this new character, Grace, who I will say this, like I say, I've not finished the book yet, but after 600 pages, she doesn't appear again after this scene. So I don't know if she's relevant or not, but this new character, Grace, starts dropping more info about how awful the bad guys are. Apparently they are keeping prisoners of war as slaves, keeping them manacled, which means cutting off their magic power, killing them if they try and run away, and then displaying their bodies, and just really messed up stuff, obviously. So I think it's clear at this point that anyone on that side of the war is probably irredeemably bad, right? They're doing some pretty depraved stuff. If you're on the side of the people who are keeping slaves and killing prisoners of war and making them eat each other, I'm just gonna go ahead and guess you're pretty irredeemable. Okay. There's no way you can be on that side and do those things and support that stuff and then have the author somehow make them a sympathetic or nuanced villain. That's just like comically evil at that point, and I don't see how that can be redeemed at all. But we'll see how it goes. There's also a mention of something called the Eternal Flame, or the Order of the Eternal Flame. I said it's unclear whether it's a building, a group, or like a faction of the Resistance, but everyone that was in it is now dead. It turns out that they're like, the Eternal Flame is like the overall group that also gets called the Resistance. Like, you have the Undying and the Eternal Flame. It took me like 300 pages to figure that out, but here we are. Some guy called the High Reeve, stupid name, is just killing everyone, and I will have my rant about the High Reeve as a title later, don't worry, we'll come to it. Who's the High Reeve? Helena hoped it was a safe question to ask. She didn't remember the title. Grace shook her head. I don't know. He still wears a helmet the way the Undying did during the war. The High Necromancer's too important for public appearances, so he sends the High Reeve instead. He's some kind of Vivimancer, but not like the rest. He kills people without even touching them. So there's, again, this is a thing that's taken me like a long time to figure out, but in this world, you need to be touching someone to use magic on them, but this guy, for some reason, can just do it from a distance, which makes him like extra powerful or something. I don't know. Resonance doesn't work like that, Helena said, correcting her reflexively. Without an array, a stable channel has to be formed through contact, and then, I know how resonance works, Grace said sharply, but I've seen him do it. Last week, Grace's voice failed. Her throat bobbed several times. There was a smuggling ring. There's been a grain shortage. Most of what we get on the outpost is rotten. A few people were bringing in extra food. It wasn't even a lot, but the warden heard rumours about the prisoners organising. 10 people in all. Public execution. The High Reeve did all of them at the same time. Did it clean so they'll last longer in the lithium mines. So here we get a little bit more explanation of magic, but not really. I was also still confused at this point about what a Vivimancer does, because that's not a term I'd like heard before, and I felt like opposite of Necromancer wasn't explaining it, so I googled it. Apparently, Google says it's generally to do with controlling organic matter and growth, and can be used for things like controlling others' bodies, or healing them, or hurting them. And that is what it seems to do throughout the book, but that's never actually explained on the page. I guess you just have to pick it up, or Google it, I don't know. I don't know where the outpost is either, or what the outpost is. That's still not been explained to me, but we'll get there, I guess. Grace says they're at a place called Central. Grace shook her head. No, they call this Central now. Houses all the Undying's experiments. She choked. I have 3 brothers. Turns out Grace is here at Central, wherever that is, to sell one of her eyeballs so that she can afford food for her younger brothers. Lovely, very dystopian. Again, I kind of wouldn't mind this as a plot point. I feel like there's something pretty dark about that, but it seems to be forgotten. It's not come back up yet, so we'll see. And then Grace is like, where were you? You were supposed to save Luc, but you didn't. And I was like, I guess Luc's the old leader, and she had to save him, okay. And then, before we can get any more answers or any more information, Grace just runs away. Okay. The woman returns with a group of necro-thralls, and it turns out they are reanimated dead people that they use as slaves. So, from what I can tell, and again, this isn't really explained, but from what I've picked up in context clues in the next 600 pages, these people kill people, and then they reanimate their corpses and tell them what to do, and that's a necro-thrall. There's also ones that they call lichers, even though that's like a slur, and they're not allowed to say that, and I think they've got another name. And lichers are when they kill someone, and then if one of the Undying's like bodies has been destroyed, they put their soul into the body of this other dead person and walk around in like a dead person suit, and that's a lich, I think. But the necro-thralls are like, I think I think they're like reanimated corpses with no personalities. They're just like mindless slaves, I think. I don't know. This is so confusing. The woman wants to take Helena to see the High Necromancer to be examined, and I was like, I assume he's the top guy in charge. It's never really explained, but he is. He's like the guy in charge. So he's like, I think he's meant to be Voldemort in the Harry Potter fanfiction. He's the parallel of that, I think. I don't know. Helena doesn't want to go because she says this was the guy who killed Luke. The High Necromancer killed Luke. Luke, who'd been the whole world to her. Helena had enlisted in the Resistance and sworn fealty to the Order of the Eternal Flame, not out of faith, but because of Luke Holdfast. Remember that. Not out of faith, but because of Luke Holdfast. Remember that, because I have complaints about it in part 2 especially. Because she might not believe in the gods. Remember that. She might not believe in the gods. She doesn't believe in the gods. She's an atheist. She doesn't believe in the gods. But she had believed in him, that he was good and kind and cared about everyone. She'd promised she'd do anything for him, but he died before her eyes. So at this point I was quite annoyed because I was like, lovely, a main character who doesn't have any personality or values of her own, she just wanders around after some man. Ew. I thought Luke was her ex-boyfriend. Turns out he's not, but I really thought he was up to the end of the first part of this book. She has to go see the High Necromancer anyway, and she realizes that Central, this building that she's in now, used to be what they called the Alchemy Tower, in the very heart of the Alchemy Institute that the Holdfasts had founded. Helena had come halfway across the world to study in this tower. Luke had been so proud of the institute his family had built, it had been the heart of Palladia. She'd known it through his eyes, all the history and meaning of it. Now it was ravaged and mutilated. So she has a cry, and she gets knocked out again. So while she's unconscious, drink. So this Alchemy Institute is like the center of all of this, and it's like, again, I'm trying to figure this out from like what I've read in the rest of the book because it's not explained here, but it's this like magical school built by this family called the Holdfasts. The Holdfasts are in control of all of Palladia, and I think maybe the surrounding areas, I don't know, because they believe they have this divine right to rule imbued on them by the god Sol, I think. And so they're like, we're chosen by God, we rule everything, we're in charge and we're rich, and it's a dictatorship. Like, that's what it is. It's a monarchy and a dictatorship, right? Crazy. But they're the good guys, apparently. Yeah, but their internal headquarters, the Alchemy Tower, has been taken over by the Undying and is now called Central. Okay. So Helena's knocked out again, as we said. When she wakes up, she's been examined by a man. Nightmare fuel. We learn this woman who we've been, like, hearing from throughout this book, but we don't actually know who she is yet. She's got a name. Her name is Dr. Stroud, but we don't know who this random guy is. He's like, blah, 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 blah. This is impossible. Blah, 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 blah. And then the High Necromancer comes in and it's like, grumble, grumble, grumble. How do you not know? Grumble, grumble, grumble. And so on. I could be a voice actor, I know. I'm great. We learn that the High Necromancer's name is actually Morrow, and here's a narration. The High Necromancer was not what she remembered. When he'd killed Luke, he'd been human. Now he was mutated. His limbs stuck out in ways that were impossibly jointed, and he was nearly the size of 2 men. She thought at first that he was wearing a mask. The High Necromancer had been masked during the celebration, wearing a huge golden crescent that concealed half of his face like an eclipsed sun. As he drew nearer, however, she realized it wasn't a mask she was staring at. Morrow's face was skull-like, his features so sunken, the skin so translucently pale that she could see through to the bone. Where his eyes should have been were 2 blackened empty hollows, as if they'd been burned out with live coals. So that's horrifying. But you know what, as a villain, I'm okay with horrifying. I think that's pretty creepy, you know, I love that. And I was like, but at least we know he's not going to be the love interest here because he's not hot. If he was hot, it doesn't matter how many people he'd killed, he'd still be viable as a love interest, because that's what happens in these romantasy books, right? But like I said earlier, I went into this book knowing absolutely nothing, so I was like, I didn't know who was meant to be the love interest, I just knew there was one somewhere. And I was like, surely it can't be this guy, surely it can't actually be anyone on the bad guy's side, because like, cannibalism, slavery. I said, at this point, as my original script, I'm just assuming there'll be a love interest. I just hope it's not one of the murdering bad guys. But if it is, I bet they'll do he was just following orders, but he didn't enjoy it. And now this one woman can redeem him and bring him to the good side, or some nonsense like that. And we'll get there. Anyway, this guy tries to read her memories, and Helena rolls around screaming because it's painful having her memories read, right? We're told she's a healer, and she's also a kind of vivimancer, so she can like change organic matter and stuff as well. so, she gets her she gets her magic suppression bracelet things replaced with newer ones when the guard, who is a person called Mandel, enters the room, and we get an answer to the first mystery: why was Helena awake in the stasis chamber? Mandel says, "No, it was not betrayal. I am loyal to our cause and loyal to you," she says to Morrow. "It was my foolish desire for vengeance, I confess it. I wanted her to suffer, but I would never betray you. Explain yourself." Mandel pushed herself up, still kneeling, her head bowed but her voice shaking with emotion. "She is a traitor to Vivimancers. She tormented me, thought herself better than me for having been part of the Holdfast's Institute. Her vivimancy blessed by the eternal flame, she had to be punished." Helena stared at the woman in dazed bewilderment. "You tampered with a prisoner and her records out of jealousy?" Stroud looked astonished. "Why didn't you report her abilities?" Mandel shrank back. "I feared that she would be favoured if it was known, that you might find her useful and not punish her as she deserved to be punished." So, whoever this Mandel person is has an issue with Helena for something that happened during the time period that Helena can't remember, and so she decided to lock her conscious in this stasis chamber as like revenge, I guess. Okay, I don't care. Morrow kills Mandel on the spot. It's pretty gross. And then he takes this bit of metal from her corpse, like the chest of her corpse, and he shoves it inside a different corpse, and all of a sudden she's back alive. And I think this is what a lich is. I think. I don't know. It's bizarre. It's weird. None of this is explained properly. So now, at this point in the book, our only mystery is like what happened to Helena's brain, and we pretty much get a hypothesis of this. Like, and we're only 3% of the way into the book here. That's like, what, 30 pages? Something like that? I don't know. I can't do maths off the top of... I mean, I can do math. We're like 30 pages into the book, and we basically get a hypothesis for why Helena's brain is the way it is. So one of the guys is like, there was a guy on the side of the Resistance who had a brain injury, but they found a way to cure him using a healer called Elaine Boyle, who was Luke's personal healer. Apparently, she was killed when they seized the Institute, and they're using her reanimated body for mining now. I was only aware of this because they hoped there were similar techniques used in the Eastern Empire. The healer, I was told, had a special ability to alter not just the brain, but the mind. They proposed to enter the mind of Bayard, that was the man with the brain injury, and heal him from within. The mood in the room suddenly shifted, growing electrified. That would be animancy, not healing, Stroud said with slow incredulity. I do not know the words were different, Shishio said. That's the man who's come in and done her manacles. The mind, I was told, resisted another's presence, but this healer believed that with many small treatments it was possible, like learning how to tolerate poison. Mithridatism, Moreau said slowly. He straightened into his full tremendous height. Soul Mithridatism. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. He advanced on Shishio as if intending to rip the answers out of him. The eternal flame found a way to make living subjects survive soul transference, and you never thought to mention this. So at this point, I was like, and tell me if I'm misunderstanding this, because we still haven't got a full answer for this, up to where I've read in the book. But this is what I'm thinking so far. The implication here is that this Elaine woman altered Helena's brain, or Elaine is Helena, or Helena is Elaine and altered her own brain. So either Elaine transferred her memories into Helena's body so she wouldn't be recognized, or there is no Elaine, or she exists and she's not really important and she's just like a distraction or something, and Helena changed her own memories. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, like, if Helena was a healer and seemed to be in a relationship with Luke, then why would he choose a different person to be his personal healer? That makes me think Elaine wasn't his personal healer, Helena was. And also they're similar names, so like basically could be the same. And then there's that thing from the last chapter where Grace recognized Helena, but Helena didn't recognize Grace. So I'm like, maybe it's Elaine in Helena's body, or maybe it's Helena with her memories wiped. Well, we know she has her memories wiped. I don't know. Anyway, the point I was thinking is, then there's some other stuff on the page that I don't know if it's in here or later, but they talk about how to do that to someone's brain, to alter their brain, you not only need to be this different kind of magician, but you need to like personally know them really well and understand their brain. So I'm like, surely you could only do that to your own brain, right? But then the soul transference thing, I don't know, things and stuff. Anyway, they're like, okay, well now this is a mystery, so let's send her off to the High Reeve. Still a stupid name. So I know like a Reeve is like an old medieval rank, right? So fun fact, they used to have this role called a Shire Reeve, and then Shire Reeves, as in Reeves of the Shire, that's where we eventually got the word sheriff from. So Shire Reeve of a time became sheriff, which is fun. I like that. So my point is like a Reeve is like a genuine position, especially in like medieval England, but calling someone a high reeve still sounds silly to me. I mean, calling someone a high necromancer still sounds silly to me, but high necromancer and the high reeve, it just sounds silly. That's just a personal thing. Anyway, she has to be sent to the high reeve to be examined, and then the chapter ends. So at this point, Helena has still done nothing and said nothing. Like, she's still just a passive character. She's nothing. Who is she? What is her personality? Why won't she do something or like say something or questions? Like, this is just page after page of things being done to her. She spent all her time so far in the book either being unconscious or being tortured or just sitting there silently. Like, I don't care about her. I don't see the appeal of this mystery because, like, who is she? Why should I care? Why do I care that her brain's been altered? Tell me. In the next chapter, she's taken back to a different room where she collapses again. And she has a little think to herself, and this is what she thinks. Transference, animancy, both words were unfamiliar. She turned them over in her mind, trying to contextualize the comments that had been made. Again, that's not a full sentence. That is not a full that you need a comma. Not, sorry, annoying. Souls and minds, and occupying the mental landscape of another person to transmute them from within. That's also not a full sentence. And the eternal flame had discovered this? Surely not. Souls were considered inviolable among those of faith. The eternal flame considered even the physical alterations of vivimancy and necromancy a risk to an immortal soul. Alteration of a mind, the transference of a soul, surely that would be seen as infinitely worse. So a bit of regurgitating what we've just read, but she's like, oh, I don't know how this can be. Okay, so now we get a bit more regurgitating of what we just read, including who was Elaine Boyle, Helena didn't know the name, and she was sure there had never been any other healers, much less a personal one designated for Luc alone. So this is leaning into my Elaine and Helena are the same person theory. I will say I was wrong on that, but we'll get there. Instead of being taken straight to the High Reeve though, she spends a few days being tortured and interrogated by Stroud, and there's some more info dumping about how Luc's family, the Holdfasts, believed they were chosen by gods to be rulers, and there's lines like, the Resistance had considered the war a holy war, a divine battle between good and evil, a testing of the faith, but Helena's motives had been more personal than that. And I thought this might lead to like a genuinely interesting story point about religion and holy wars, and rulers who believe they have a divine right over being democratically elected, or how both sides were controlling through fear but in different ways, you know, fear of punishment from the gods versus fear of punishment by man through violence. It could have discussed some really interesting things there, and I was keen to know what Helena's views were on this conflict. Like, why did she choose to side with the Resistance if she wasn't actually religious? What are her values? Does she ever feel any real internal conflict? What ideologies guide her actions? But apparently in this first part of the book, we don't get any of that interesting stuff. Instead, she's just portrayed as this silly little girl acting because she liked a boy, and so she just follows his politics like a good silent little woman, and it just really frustrated me. This whole first part of the book is just her being like, Luc was so perfect, and I don't believe in his religion, and I don't care about politics, so I don't even know about that. I just follow a man. And then the second part of the book starts to look at some of these questions a little bit more, but it never actually dives into it. It never actually explores these topics. There's like brief mentions of these conflicts, and then it's like, yeah, but you know, I have feelings for this boy, and so it just, you never go deep with it. It's so annoying. And Helena's saying all this stuff now about not being religious, but like supporting Luc, but like it makes certain stuff that happens in the second part of the book not make sense. Yeah, so it says Helena's motives had been more personal than that. Luc didn't need to be divine for her to want to save him. He could have been entirely ordinary and she would have made all the same choices. Remember that, because this doesn't make sense with some of the conflicts she has later in part 2, but that's another video for you guys. Then there's some stuff about how at the Institute, Helena was treated differently by other students, and I'm paraphrasing here, because she was working class and a foreigner, and she earned her place there, while the other students were from rich guild families who basically bought their way in or were born into it, and they all looked down on her. Again, this could be really interesting if it wasn't all just a vessel to talk about how amazing Luc is, with him telling her Helena was special though. Why would his family want another guild student at their institute when they could have someone like her? Luc had always had a talent for making Helena feel like she was special rather than painfully out of place. She'd wanted to prove him right, that she was something that she'd be worth believing in. Her family wouldn't be wrong about her. Sorry, his family wouldn't be wrong about her. She'd focused on her education and ignored political hostilities around her. And like, we love to see a successful, talented woman getting an education. I just hate that she's only doing it for a man, you know? We're also told that the guild people are the bad guys in this, because they're the one who partnered with the Undying eventually. But the guild guys started off as bad guys because they used to criticize Luke's dad leadership, and that's how the war started. They'd say that his father was being accused of allowing the country to fall behind because of his derelict governance, or that the guilds had proposed that the Principate's power be limited to religious affairs and that they be the ones to run the country. It seemed that nothing Principate Apollo, Luke's dad, did was ever enough for the guilds. Their complaints and demands were endless. When Principate Apollo was murdered, the guilds didn't see a tragedy at all, but an opportunity. They used Luke's age, only 16, as a pretext for declaring a reformation. No longer would religious elites and a warrior class rule Palladia. The city-state would be governed by the newly formed guild assembly. So at this point, I'm kind of on their side. You want us to be against the people who wanted democracy and representation, rather than a 16-year-old dictator who believes he has a divine right. I don't know. But anyway, while the guild's like, hey, no, we want democracy, Morrow shows up and he offers people immortality, so suddenly he's in charge of that side. Which, you know, I guess the immortality itself isn't bad, but his whole method of killing people and cannibalism is. But other than that, I'm kind of on the side of the guild. I don't know. The politics in this book is so complex for no reason, you know? Back to Helena's interrogation, and we finally learn what a vivimancer is. Although healers were relatively common in remote parts of Palladia, vivimancy was rare enough that there were all kinds of claims about what vivimancers were capable of. That they could enthrall the living just as necromancers enthralled the dead, for instance, and perform unspeakable transmutations upon living flesh. So we finally got that. It's still not a great explanation. The one I googled earlier was better, but here we are. Then there's just more scenes of Helena being tortured by Stroud and other people, and I'm just starting to think this book is torture porn at this point, and 600 pages into it, that's pretty much all I've seen so far. Can't say I'm a fan. Stroud was not enthralling, but she was an expert in paralyzing and transmutationally manipulating Helena at the slightest provocation. If Helena twitched too much, Stroud would fuse her bones together to keep her still. She seemed to take delight in the technicality of it not being torture. Sometimes she left Helena like that for hours. Yeah, no, that's literally torture. That's just torture. Okay, sorry, I took a break to go get some lunch, but we are back now. So Helena is busy wandering around the central building when she bumps into a man who she recognizes as Jan Crowther, who apparently used to be on the Eternal Flame Council. And when I keep hearing Eternal Flame, I just keep thinking of the Bangle song and I can't take it seriously. Eternal Flame! But she realizes it's not actually Jan Crowther, it's someone using his body. This wasn't Crowther. One of the Undying was wearing his corpse. On the rare occasions when they couldn't regenerate anymore, so grievously wounded in battle that their immortal bodies could no longer heal, the Undying could move themselves into their necrothralls instead. It's why the Resistance had called them lichers. She's saying this like it's some sort of revelation, but we literally just saw it in the last scene. We saw Morrow do it to Mandel. So, okay, I guess. It was an imperfect solution. Even when maintained, the bodies rotted slowly around them and lacked the regenerative qualities of the near-impervious originals. Helena suspected this was why Morrow was so interested in transference. The method had the potential to allow the Undying to move into living bodies instead. So she bumps into Crowther, then nothing interesting happens, and Helena is finally taken to the High Reeves' place, his big house. Helena was pushed into the backseat of a motor car, a necrothrall cramming her towards the middle as it seated itself beside her. The smell of rot immediately began to fill the enclosed space. And I don't know why, but I'm so shocked that they have cars in this world. This is one of the things that just like, you'll see it throughout this first part. It's really jarring. It just feels wrong and out of place. Because I'm really confused about when this is supposed to take place. Like, what kind of time period? What kind of world? This is clearly a fictional world, right? As we'll see. This isn't Earth. This is a fictional world. And yet somehow they still have cars. They have, like, cars from our time. They have other technology from our time. And then they have magic. And then they have, like, future tech, like stasis chambers and these screen X-ray machine things. And then they also have, like, medieval weaponry and, like, you'll see as we go on, it's confusing. If what Grace had said was true, the High Reeve preferred murder to strategic choices like interrogation. Men prone to violence were generally thoughtless, acting with emotion first and applying reason after. Kind of love this men are so emotional bit. It's hilarious and true. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of page filler of Helena thinking about everything we've just read, because this book is just repetitive filler. I swear it needs an editor desperately. It could have been half the length it was, if not less. And then she's like, I need to escape, but I can't. So instead of giving up my secrets, I don't know, I'll try and provoke this guy into killing me, because that's the logic. So here we have the whole suicidal ideation thing where she's like, but even this is so passive. Like, she's not doing anything to try and escape. She's not actually doing anything to, like, kill herself. She's like, I don't know. Guess I'll just try and make him kill me. She's so passive, it's really annoying. So she gets to the creepy mansion, and a woman is stood outside who she describes as barely more than a girl, and then later, the girl in green. So this woman, this young girl, is clearly young, and then it also goes on to describe her chest, so that felt a little bit creepy. Her attention turned to Stroud, and she donned a brittle smile. Welcome to Spirefell. My husband is waiting for you. So I'm getting child marriage vibes at this point. Barely more than a child, young girl, married, let's talk about her chest. I don't like this. The house has a dead butler, because why not? And she finally meets the High Reeve, and it turns out it's some guy she knew from magic school called Kaine Ferron. He has silver white hair and pale skin, so I think this is the Draco Malfoy love interest character. And I said I'm still hoping he's not the love interest, because all we've been told about him so far is that he's a cold-blooded murderer, and I can't deal with a book trying to redeem a war criminal like that. Sadly, he is the love interest. He is one of the main characters, and 600 pages in, he has not been, in my eyes, redeemed. I do not like him. He looked at Helena again, no emotion on his face, but there was a predatory calculation in his eyes, like a wolf, I'm sure, he says. And we find out why she's there as Kaine, or Ferron as he gets called for this whole first half of the book, is given his instructions. The High Necromancer wishes to have results before the winter solstice. Per his commands, you're to perform the temporary transference method upon her as frequently as possible to achieve singularity without extinguishing her soul. Once that is accomplished, and you've accustomed yourself to her mind, I believe that reversing the transmutations of her memory should be a small matter for you. You may examine what's concealed, and when it's done, I'll come to retrieve her. The High Necromancer intends to extract the memories as well. So at this point, I was still kind of confused about what the plan was. From what I can tell now, having read more, they want Ferron to reverse the memory erasure in her head and reverse all the rerouting, and then extract the memories that she's suppressed, and then get himself aligned with her brain so they could potentially put someone else's soul into her brain. I think that's the plan. It's not really what they end up doing. The whole motivation of every character in this book is so muddled and nonsensy, and no, that sounds like I'm saying nonsense. It's so muddled and full of nonsense. So much of it just doesn't make sense. I feel like the author just wanted to put these characters together in these situations and then came up with a reason for it afterwards. And so those reasons and the motivations don't really make a lot of logical sense. It bothers me. It bothers me. We find out that the wife is called Aurelia, and she's just portrayed as this like silly, stuck-up little brat. I thought it would pass nonsense like this, but apparently not. I did think at first I had hope. I was like, oh, if he's married, then maybe he's not the love interest. This is good. Otherwise, they're going to do something like he's only forced to marry her because he has to and he doesn't really love her, or she cheats on him, so he's like, get out of here, and then he becomes a love interest. I don't know. I thought they were going to do something like that if they made him the love interest, but I kind of still hoped at this point that they didn't, but he is. Does that make sense? I hate it. Yeah, I hate how Aurelia's written. It's giving misogyny. The girl in green made an abrupt sound, and all her perfect ringlets trembled. You mean we really have to keep her? She burst out. I just don't see how it's fair. She's not even Palladian. Why can't she stay at the outpost with the rest of them? Why are we keeping her here? I had all these parties planned this season. I've already had to cancel 3 dinners and make up excuses about why. No one asked me if I wanted a prisoner. Her voice was fluting with a note of tearful petulance. And what is she wearing? If anyone sees her, it'll be all anyone talks about. So I hate this. Ferron rifles through Helena's memories without her consent, of course, because what is consent? Apparently it just doesn't matter. And afterwards she falls to the floor violently because it was painful. And this book really is just how many ways can you torture one woman? It's gross. The wife brags about how this house, big mansion that they're in, is made of pure iron, which seems like an odd choice to me. I feel like that would be very uncomfortable. You know, like iron floors, iron walls, that would be cold, right? But what do I know? I'm not even a homeowner yet. And then she's like, I was chosen to be Kaine's wife. So I'm like, yep, arranged marriage, child marriage, seemingly. And she says she was chosen because she can magically control iron. And then she shows off by turning the rings that she's wearing into knives. And then, whew, I mean, that does seem like a cool power, to be honest. And then Helena's like, if the house is iron, that meant Aurelia could wield it like a weapon. And I mean, that would be kind of cool to see. Like, absolutely. Give me like some sort of horror vibes with like shifting rooms and doors that move and appear and disappear and corridors that change. Like, that would be really cool. They don't do that, but that would be really cool. But here's the thing, like, I had a question. Why does this make her the perfect match for him? If anything, does that not mean she's like the biggest danger to him? Because if she's feeling horrible enough and they have one argument, can she not just trap him inside his own home, like with no way for him to get out? Like, surely this is an awful choice for an arranged marriage. Although it does turn out, we don't know at this point, and it's not explained until much later, Ferron also has iron magic, so I guess she couldn't trap him, and I guess they're kind of equally matched. much, but whatever. That wasn't explained at this point. We didn't know he had iron magic. Anyway, Helena has to stay in this big room with a locked window so she can't escape. End of chapter. Chapter 4. This chapter starts with Helena trying to find a way to kill herself, which feels honestly unearned, for lack of a better word. Like, we've just seen so little of her personality, and we know so little about her motivations, her ideas, her values. Like, it just feels like this comes out of nowhere, other than like her thinking, maybe I can do it in the car, you know what I mean? Like, all we know about her is she just spent 14 months in a stasis chamber, she woke up with a bunch of memories wiped, she's been held prisoner, and her first thought is, yeah, better kill myself. This doesn't make sense. Like, Anyway, it's written in such a boring and undramatic way, which is, she went back to the bedroom and was disappointed to find that there weren't any drape cords for her to hang herself with. She checked behind all the curtains in case one had been missed. That's it, that's her suicide attempt. It's ridiculous. Since she can't kill herself, she decides to take a wander around the mansion instead, but she gets scared of the dark and decides to stay inside her room instead. She is gifted an impractical sounding red dress, clean underwear, and is fed gross, sloppy leftovers, like the stuff you'd put in like a pig trough. We get some backstory about Kaine, or Ferron, and Helena, and they were basically academic rivals, and she took over the top spot from him at school. So during the 6 occasions Helena took the national exam, top rank had swung like a pendulum. Helena Marino, Kaine Ferron, a rivalry, albeit an indirect one, never openly acknowledged. And then it all comes back to Luc again too, of course. Luc had been so proud of her, loudly proclaiming that year 1 barely counted because it had been Helena's first year ever studying alchemy, and she was doing it in her second language. That second language thing is interesting, because it's never been mentioned before, and it's actually never mentioned again in the book. Yeah, okay, that's the thing. Back in the present, and she tries to leave the room again, but she falls, and she sees visions of her old roommate, Lila, I think it's Lila. She passes out again, so drink. This is, I believe, Lila's first mention, and Lila is, like, supposedly quite a main character. A lot of what Helena does is because of Lila, but we never really see much of her and Lila interacting. We don't really know anything about Lila. Lila's a paladin who would protect Luc, and that's about it. That's all we really know about her. It's just so nothingy. None of these characters are developed at all, and I think that's because it originated as fanfiction. I'll get into this more later, but it feels like the author was relying a lot on us already knowing these established characters, so she didn't bother to give them backstories or motivations or personalities, you know? Later, Aurelia takes Helena to a room and says that she needs to wait for Ferron there. He shows up, he's immediately a monster because it turns out it's his bedroom, and he's like, why are you here? And then he's like, let's get this over with. Helena didn't move because she never moves because she's passive this entire first part of the book. His gaze lifted. Come here. When she didn't obey, a small smile curved along his lips. I can make you if you don't. We hate him. He raised his hands and gestured lazily, long fingers curling with perfect precision, knuckle by knuckle. You know what it gives me vibes of? You know the bit in Adventure Time where the deer takes off his hooves and he's got fingers? Sorry. Helena's limbs began moving against her will, like a puppet manipulated across a stage. Her legs bent, lifted, weight shifting, step, another step. She fought against it, tensing, but it only made her bones feel like they'd snap. It stopped once she was within arm's reach. He tilted her chin up with a fingertip, their eyes meeting. See, he said, it'll be easier if you obey. Don't you just love when working class immigrant women have no bodily autonomy and are treated like puppets and slaves by rich, cis, straight, white men? Romance. There could actually be great commentary here about that, but the book just misses the point and sees no problem with this. It goes on to romanticize this kind of behavior. Shocking. So he does this whole rooting through her mind thing again. Little deer fingers. Sorry, I shouldn't, but yeah, it's awful. Again, without her consent, it's painful. She's screaming. It's just another on-page torture scene. I do wish I was more invested in these characters in this situation, but I feel like this is just a poorly thought out mechanism to get the main characters in the same house together. I don't know. For some reason, he gets furious and screams at her to get out, and he's like, I said get out! He looked like an animal ready to lunge and rip her throat open with his bare teeth. I don't really know why he did this, I can't remember, but he's mad, he's aggressive, because he's an emotional little man-child. As she stumbles out of the room, she can't see properly, she's having bloody visions, and she decides to throw herself down some stairs to kill herself, because that's her first response to everything. But then Ferron stops her, and when I say stops, I mean he physically assaults her. She tried to jerk loose, lunging towards escape, but he dragged her back from the railing and down the stairs as she beat and clawed at him, trying to rip herself free. He didn't stop. He pulled her through the house, practically kicking in the door of her room before shoving her onto the bed. After the whole trying to uncover memories in her brain with magic thing, she gets really ill, she passes out for a couple of days, she has crazy dreams, and they have to call a doctor. Cool. The next... Passed out. Drink. God's sake. The next day, she's allowed out in the walled gardens of the mansion to get some fresh air, but she ends up screaming and running around in the rain because she's dramatic like that, I guess. And okay, remember earlier when I said I was confused about when this book was set? Because, you know, there's clearly cars, but magic, and also... Anyway, she steals a newspaper from Ferron, and the date says it's November 1788. Or... yeah, no, it's November. November 1788. This is another confusing thing, right? They use the months like November and blah, 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 but instead of like New Year or whatever, they go by like solstices. And as you'll see later, like the whole solar system's weird because you've got planets that are like, oh, little bird on the window. You got planets that are like Mercury, Mars, Venus, and then the planet that she's on, which isn't Earth, it's called something else, we'll get to it. But then the days are like, they're not called like Monday, Tuesday, whatever. They're like, I don't even know what they are now. They're called something. They're like Matter Day or I don't know, I can't remember. But like, they're not our days of the week, but they are our months. And the year system is like ours, but not our. It's so confusing. So 1788, they have cars, and she's confused because the last thing she remembers is 1786. So she realizes she's lost around 19 months of memories. But again, that's confusing because I was like, she clearly has some memories of like the end of the wars because she knows that Luc was killed, right? So like, what does she know and what doesn't she know? This is never explained. There's no clear timeline at this point, or up to about 600 pages in, that explain what she remembers and what she doesn't. So it seems like she's like, I know school and I know Luc, I know there was a war, and apparently she was working in the hospital then, but she doesn't seem to acknowledge that she was working in the hospital, and she has to be told she was working in the hospital. And then the war goes on, and then she loses her memories, and then Luc's killed, and she seems to remember Luc being killed, and then she's in the stasis chamber. So it's like, she remembers this area's cloudy, she doesn't remember this, and then she remembers a thing here, and then she's in stasis. No, I don't know. An article in the new... Or does she even remember Luc being killed? Well, clearly she's having visions of it. So she does... I don't know. Oh, this book is such a little bum. So an article in the newspaper that she's given conveniently tells her that the Ferrons, one of New Palladia's oldest families, have a history in the region that predates the Holdfasts. They were frequent victims of the Eternal Flame's persecution. Iron Guildmaster Artreus Ferron was arrested and executed for speaking against Holdfast's oppressive regime, and his son Kaine Ferron was baselessly accused of assassinating Principate Apollo Holdfast. All charges against father and son were later dropped. And she's shocked at this because Ferron had been accused of killing the Principate, the assassination responsible for causing the war. She stared at the words until they blurred. How did you not know this? This is why the memory timeline doesn't make sense. Clearly she was aware there was a war, right? She's aware of some of that. The war lasted more than 19 months, so she clearly must have some memories of the war, surely. I don't know. She seems to know there was a war happening. She seems to know that, but she doesn't remember what caused the war, which is that apparently this guy killed your boyfriend's dad. Except he's not a boyfriend. I thought he was a boyfriend. He's not a boyfriend. He killed your best friend's dad or whatever. This book is so stupid. It doesn't make sense to me. So basically what caused this whole thing was Kaine Ferron's dad was like, hey, Luc's dad, ruling over this country like a dictator, that's a bit oppressive, mate. Like, maybe we could have a council instead of a dictatorship. And then this guy is like, oh my god, that's treason. Arrest him. And then Ferron's dad is like, oh, I admit it, I did it, I committed treason. And then Morrow comes in, who's the High Necromancer, and is like, Kaine, Ferron, the son, your dad's a traitor to us because he admitted he was a traitor to them. Therefore, you need to do what I say and go kill Luc's dad. And then son Ferron is like, yeah, sure, I'll go kill Luc's dad. And then he does. And then Luc is now in charge, except he's only 16. So I assume Ferron was only 16 when he did the murdering as well. And now Luc's in charge and Ferron's rising up the ranks. And that started the war properly. But there was already stuff happening before. So why does she not know this if she knows there was a war? There's so many holes in this. I don't understand any of it. I'm genuinely frustrated. Oh my god. Yeah, see, look at this. I said in my original script, before I knew the rest of the timeline, it's not like this stuff happened during her memory loss. This stuff happened before the start of the war, so presumably years before she lost any of her memory. This book is so stupid. Because, like, if he... Right, here's the thing. Right, getting my little brain on trying to figure this out. Luc and Helena are the same age. I think Ferron's the same age as well. He might be a year older, but he's roughly the same same age. If Luc came into power when he was 16, that means Ferron killed Luc's dad when they were all 16. If Helena is like 25 now, and she's been in stasis for 14 months, and then she lost 19 months of memories before that, that's almost 3 years. That would take her back to 22. The last thing she remembers is being 21, 22. That means that the murder happened like 5 years before her supposed memory loss started. So why doesn't she know this? I would like to pull my hair out now, please. I'm feeling very frustrated. Okay. Then there's more crap in the newspapers, including this awful story. An editorial caught her eye. It was almost innocuous, describing the current labour shortage and lamenting the recent loss of so many talented alchemists in the conflict caused by the Eternal Flame. Obviously, these newspapers are propaganda, but also... There were statistics presented about how Palladia's economy was expected to continue to shrink due to a multi-generational loss of alchemists. The solution, the author declared, was sponsored births. The article suddenly stopped being editorial and read more like an advertisement. The head of the new science and alchemy department at Central, Irmgard Stroud, was heading up a program to bolster the next generation of alchemists using scientific selection methods to give them the best start. Volunteers were wanted. Participants would be provided food and lodgings, and upon completion of the program, those with criminal convictions would be eligible for retrial. Helena read the editorial several times, hardly able to believe what she was seeing. It was a breeding program being passed off as an economic solution. Nazis. As if alchemists were dogs to mate in pursuit of economically desirable transmutation abilities. Again, that's not a full sentence. But yeah, gross. Gross, gross, gross. I said at this point, please do not have this book have Helena choose to get pregnant so she can get out of being punished for being part of the resistance or whatever. That's not what this book does. It's worse. So I felt at this point like the book was trying to be a bit like The Handmaid's Tale, but without the excellent writing or thought-provoking commentary. Helena decides to go for another shower because that's a thing in this 1700s world. Showers, cars and showers, okay. And even then now at this point, right, she's been awake for days. She's been, I don't know, it's probably like a week or two's passed at this point, and she's already had a shower once, and now she's having another one. Conveniently, for the sake of the plot, this is only the first time she notices, oh my god, I have scars on my body that I've never seen before. Like, how did you not see them before? Do you just not look at your body? Are you just not aware? Wild. And here's the thing, right? Some of these scars in particular are on the palms of her hands. You're telling me that in like a week to 2 weeks, she hasn't once looked down at the palms of her hands? Wild. She goes outside later, and when she's next out there, we're told the rain did not cease. Instead, the sky dimmed as dusk fell. At this point in the lunar cycles, even Lumithia, the brighter moon, had waned too much for her light to penetrate the cloud cover. So, okay, this isn't Earth, we know this now. This is what I mentioned before. This is a fictional planet, but with 2 moons. But earlier, she was going on about, like, the solar system she's in, and their links to, like, metal and stuff like that. And she listed off planets like Mars, Mercury, Venus, basically all the other planets in our solar system. So basically this is where Earth is. It's kind of like Earth. It's in our solar system, but it's not Earth because we've got 2 moons and the countries are different, and it's the 1700s and times and months work the same way, except days of the week are named different things, and there's still 7 of them though, but they have different names, and they have magic and cars and showers. And as we find out later, they have electric lights and radiators and sort of cameras, but also swords and no phones, no radios. They have to pass everything on via letter. So you have cars and photographs and radiators and showers, but not radios or phones or television. And it's the 1700s. I'm running out of words. I can't. Okay. Say what you want about other kind of not so great fantasy dystopian fiction series as like, I don't know, like ones that are genuinely not necessarily well written, like Divergent or The Selection or things like that. Say what you want about the problems with those book series, but at least they're consistent in their world building and their settings make sense, you know? The other confusing thing is that Helena keeps being scared of the house because apparently it's always dark at inconvenient times. So I was like, does this place not have lights and light switches, or at least like candles or windows? I was like, is there not like lights you can turn on? But turns out, yes, there are lights. There's like electric lights overhead and everywhere, and there's switches. She's just not using them for the sake of the plot. I don't know why she's not. But since she's so scared of the dark, she ends up curling up on the floor and having a little cry until Ferron appears, and somehow she can see him despite being in this pitch black dark corridor. How? I don't know. Maybe his face just emanates light because he's so pale and something pale. I don't know. He's shocked that she's scared of the dark, and so he drags her back to her room room where he proceeds to mock her for opening up about why she's scared of the dark. It's from her time trapped in the stasis tank, obviously. And then I was like, okay, now thinking about it, it was literally never explained why she or anyone else was in the stasis tanks in the first place. That's still not explained by where I've got up to in the book later, so I don't know. I guess we'll find out later. I assumed it was like to move them somewhere far away, but no. And then I was like, well, maybe you need to keep youthful bodies and then just unfreeze them when they need a new slave. But then half the bodies die and rot in stasis anyway. So like, even if you're turning them into necrothralls with the dead bodies, like they're all rotted and they're unusable, so they just get thrown away basically anyway. So why not just keep them in prison? I don't know. Okay, at this point, we are 10% of the way into the book. Honestly, I was bored at this point and confused and bored, and did I mention bored? And if I was reading this just like for fun, right, I don't think I would have continued with this. This would have been like, okay, I'm done, I'm bored, I'm fed up, stop. And like, don't get me wrong, I love a long book. The 1,000 pages is not what the problem is. There are some really, really good long books that I've read even just recently and just throughout my life, you know? I got some examples here. So I've read and reread Long Live Evil and its sequel. They're like 500-600 pages each, and I love them. I think they're great. They're fun, they're silly, they're a bit campy, they're not serious. They're my guilty pleasure read at the minute. I love them. Kwang's, how do I pronounce this? Is it catabasis or catabasis? I don't actually know how you pronounce it, but that's, 560 pages? Not my favourite novel of hers, but very, very, very good. Really enjoyed that. Babel is still my number one of hers, or Babel. Again, how do you pronounce it? I saw an interview actually with R.F. Kuang, and they were like, oh, how do you pronounce it? And she was like, even I don't know. Sometimes I say Babel, sometimes I say Babel. So I was like, I get that. Anyway, point is, they're longish books. I love them. Recently read The Institute by Stephen King. That's 560 pages. Love that. Nearly finished reading Sleeping Beauties recently. That's 700 pages. In the past, one of my favourite ever books is Stephen King's 11/22/63. That is a chunky 850 pages. And then you have some other really, really long books, which are fantastic. Like the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Count of Monte Cristo, Anna Karenina. Like, I have nothing against a long book, as long as you're using those pages with purpose, you know? Don't just make something long for the sake of it or because you don't know how to edit. If the story's compelling and the characters are interesting and the writing is of a good quality, then, and also like the pacing of the story is good, then to me, I'm all about the long books that I can get lost in and just like immerse myself in. I love that. I think it's great. But when you got books like this where your book is over 1,000 pages long and I'm already this bored 100 pages in and nothing's really happened and I don't care about your characters, I'm like, maybe you should have worked with an editor to get this down to like a third of the length, you know? Just a thought. Okay, so on to chapter 7. Ferron took her to and from the courtyard each day. His mood was always dark after that, and he'd mockingly point out the location of the various light switches that she was too dense to observe on her own. Too dense, in quotation marks there. So, clearly there are lights in this world. She just hasn't been seeing... I don't know. I don't understand. Does the author want Helena to be stupid? Or is she just writing in these massive plot holes for the sake of convenience? Please tell me. Meanwhile, Helena is still busy trying to kill herself because I guess the plot needs to give her something to do while she's busy sitting around doing nothing and just having things happen to her. Well, no, I say that. She doesn't even plan to kill herself or try to kill herself. She just thinks about, maybe I should kill myself. Just thinks about it a bit. One day, while she is exploring, she finds an unfinished family portrait of Ferron as a kid and his parents. And this is a painting of them, an unfinished painting. So this is a world where photographs exist. We know because we see photographs happen later, and yet you choose to have a painting here. Don't understand. Electric lights, cars, lorries. There's lorries in this world. Radiators, showers, cameras and photographs, stasis chambers, and paintings. Like, maybe this is just meant to show that they're super rich because, you know, they can have a painting commissioned. They're rich people. But then why would there not also be family photos around? Why is the only image of this family an unfinished painting? Yeah, this book feels full of really confusing anachronisms and like not in any kind of good or interesting way, just in a I don't get it kind of way. Oh, moving on. Stroud comes back to check up on Helena's health, and we're finally told that what was wrong with Helena is after her last magical brain surgery, she had a seizure. Lovely. And it's while she's here that Stroud makes a bunch of creepy claims about wanting Helena next for her breeding program because she's got good magical genes. Ew, gross. I get the eugenics warning now. Yeah. Yay for treating a woman's body like an object. We do get the revelation, though, that Helena's chin snapped up. Well, you won't have much luck with me. I'm sterilized. And at this point, I was like, maybe I will like this book after all. Thank God, I love this, right? We're not going to get a forced pregnancy plot. We're not going to get her, like, selling her womb so she can get some freedom. Like we're not going to get that. thank you. I was so damn grateful. And I was like, you know what? You don't actually see many sterilized women represented in fiction, especially not as the main characters and protagonists and love interests. So I was like, you know what? That is really refreshing. I really, really love that. It's nice to get this like sterilized woman romance representation. Love it. I really liked that until Helena looked away, staring across the room so hard her vision blurred. It was one of the conditions that Falcon had for allowing me in the city. Since vivimancy is a corruption of the soul that begins in the womb, it could be passed on. I'd already taken vows as a healer that I wouldn't ever marry or have children, but she swallowed. He wanted to be sure. So instead of this being wonderful, empowering representation, and instead of like, one side controlling her body with like a forced pregnancy, for example, we have the other side controlling her body with forced sterilization. So this isn't her choice. This isn't good representation. She has no bodily autonomy. This world does not allow women bodily autonomy, and I kind of hate it. I was also at this point like, who the hell was Falcon? Like, do we know him? Turns out I had to look back through the rest of the book. He got one mention before for being the spiritual counselor of the Eternal Flames Council, whatever that means. Yeah, it was at this point, right? I think I mentioned it before, but it was at this point I realized that I was a bit of an idiot. The Eternal Flame Council, or Order of the Eternal Flame as it's sometimes called, is just meant to be a ripoff of the Order of the Phoenix, right? From not Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, because it started as Harry Potter fanfiction. So I was like, okay, so the Undying of Voldemort's people, the Death Eaters, we've established this, but it doesn't translate well at all, and it doesn't really make sense as like a comparison. And you can see what this is kind of where the plot holes have come in, because like, tell me if I'm remembering this wrong, because again, not really a Harry Potter fan, but if I remember correctly, Voldemort had wanted like mass ethnic cleansing of like all non-magical people, right? He was like a super magic racist, or a magic super racist, one of the ones. Clearly he was the bad guy, his followers were bad guys, and the Order were the good guys trying to stop him, right? But in this book, the bad guys are the ones who are like, yay democracy, yay eternal life, and then they turn bad when they get power because suddenly, or like to get power, because they're just murdering a bunch of magical people who didn't conform, and now they're trying to force pregnancy on other magical people to make more magical people that fit with their ideas. So it's like their initial ideas were actually quite good and made sense, unlike the Voldemort people's original ideas, but their execution is bad in this. And then the good guys make sense in Harry Potter because they're like, no, we don't want genocide, we don't want like a non-magical person holocaust, let's stop you. And that makes sense, they're like understandably good. But in this, the good guys are like rich religious zealots who believe they should be divine dictators, which doesn't really sound good to me. And they're also like, yeah, and we can control women's bodies with like forced sterilization for people with the wrong kind of magic. So I mean, it sounds like this is just like Nazis fighting Nazis. You know what I mean? It's bad guy versus bad guy, both with different Nazi ideas. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm all for like complex politics and all that sort of thing, but like there's complex and then there's just muddled and bizarre, and that's what this book is. Stroud goes on to Helena that your eternal flame was quite adept at identifying potential vivimancers not even born. It was what, 30 years ago that Principate Helios mandated that all pregnancies be managed by the Faith's hospitals, devout doctors trained to know what to look for and what solutions to offer. What kind of parents would want to keep a monster once they're warned of the danger? So, see what I mean? They're also, both sides are big on eugenics, both sides are awful, okay? Next up, Helena asks Ferron if he killed her boyfriend's dad, and he says, not officially. And she's like, but did you? And he asks what we've all been thinking. You don't remember? He shook his head. Did you even do anything during the war? The way the holdfasts used to parade you around, you'd think you would have at least tried to be useful, but you have the most unexceptional personnel file I've ever seen. He scoffed. How many years of your life did you spend in that hospital? And he's right. Why doesn't she remember? Like, what was she doing? I don't understand how this memory loss thing works and when it's meant to cover. I don't know. How does she not know the basics of like what caused the war she was supposedly fighting in? I don't know. Anyway, he just brags about killing Luke's dad and then the chapter ends and we get a flashback to Luke during the war. I think this is like a recovered memory in Helena's mind, I think. He says, this is how we win. This is how we've always won. My father, my grandfather, and all the Principates going back to Orion. They won by trusting that good would triumph over evil, and I have to do the same. Explain to me again how you're good guys? I get how the other side's evil, but how are you the good guys? It's just kind of accepted in this world that like, oh, they're good. Why? Why are they good? I don't get it. Right, and in this like flashback memory, it seems like Luke is this opium smoking mess, right? He's like off his head, whatever. And him and Helena seem like really toxic together. But then the flashback or memory ends with her saying that she would do anything for him. And yeah, I got really confused here. There's some more info dumping to give Luke a backstory. His family have the magical magical powers to A, turn lead into gold, and B, create magic fire. But there are rules to prove that they're the good guys. So in Orion's work, he was like the original one of their family who took control. Alchemization was predicated upon spiritual purity. Only an alchemist with a soul as pure as the metal they sought to create could alchemize it. However, Luc had always preferred pyromancy, biomagic. There were strict rules the family had to abide by when alchemizing gold. The heavenly metal could not be abused or used for selfish purposes. After all, the neighbouring countries and Palladia's own currency had to be respected. There were rules about fire too, but not nearly so elaborate as those involving gold production. So I was like, dress it up how you want, but like, there's no ethical millionaires, and that's what these guys were in this world, so I don't believe they're good guys. But it's funny, all these rules and stuff here, not brought up again. They're not mentioned once in the next however much that I've read. Maybe they come up again in the last quarter of the book, third of the book, but it seems odd to mention it once and then never again for like 2/3 of the book, you know? So back in the present day, out of the recovered memory, Helena overheard Ferron having an argument with the man that she saw before using the body of a guy from the Resistance, Crowther, right? So instead of building any tension or creating a mystery of like, oh my god, who's this man? Who's using his body? What happened to him? We're just straight up told, this is Ferron's dad. So Ferron's dad, who I think we thought was dead ages ago, is actually using Crowther's body somehow. Okay. Publicly, he's thought to be dead, but he's secretly in Crowther's body. Cool. Ferron and his dad both scream awful things at each other like, I should have refused your mother's pleas and had you killed in the womb, Atreus said, his face contorting with rage. You deserve none of the suffering we endured for you. So this is clearly a very healthy father-son dynamic. Blah blah blah. Ferron uses his magic to force Helena to take some mystery pills. Once again, why are women not allowed bodily autonomy in this book? Why is Helena so passive all the time? These pills make magic used on her last longer, so he uses his magic to suppress her emotions in her brain, and then the tablets make that last longer. And she considered it was certainly easier to be near Ferron now that she didn't feel overwhelmed by how much she hated him and afraid of his capacity to hurt her. She was still excruciatingly aware of how dangerous he was, but without the sickening physical reaction of that knowledge. You're being different to me now. You're less mean. She furrowed her eyebrows in confusion, a feeling she was still, apparently, capable of experiencing. Why would I torture you when you won't react? He asked softly in her ear. He straightened, raising an eyebrow. See? Nothing. No elevated pulse, no pounding heart. I could bring in one of your little friends and peel their skin right off here in front of you and you wouldn't react. He shook his head. There's no fun in that. What is wrong with this man? At this point, she also manages to find a secret hidden camera in her room. Well, actually, no, not a hidden camera. A hidden magical eyeball that's spying on her. Yeah. So we can have cameras that can take photos and put the photos in newspapers, but not take family portraits to put up around the home. And we can have cars and electric lights, but we can't have a video camera in the home. We have to enchant a magical eyeball and look through the magical eyeball to spy on people. It's stupid. And not even just like any magical eyeball, they're paying people a pretty hefty sum to have their eyeballs taken out, like the Grace woman in the beginning. Okay, sure. I hate this book. The next day, Helena has bad withdrawals from the pills. She throws up. She gets super depressed. She feels rubbish. It's all very don't do drugs, kids, you know? And then a few days later, we get another scene of transference, the magical brain surgery. And it just drags out so much. There's so much repetition here. I'm still confused about what transference is. Is it him trying to put his soul into her brain? Is it the act of trying to undo all the changed brainness and the memories? And it's never explained. I don't know. I don't think the author even knows really what it is. But it's okay, because this time, hang on, I don't even have a drink anymore. But you guys drink, because Helena passes out again. She has another seizure, she ends up unconscious, and when she wakes up, she sees a man that she doesn't recognize holding her face, and then she passes out again, so drink. That's 2 times passing out in like half a page. When she wakes up again, she realizes, oh my god, that strange man holding my face that I didn't recognize? It's actually Ferron. Don't know why she didn't recognize him, but for the sake of plot, she didn't, so okay. Blah, blah, blah. Bunch of nothing happens. There's a party at the mansion. Helena sneaks out to see what's happening and catches Aurelia cheating on Ferron. Like, that's a surprise. We all knew it was going to happen if, like, Helena and Ferron are going to end up together, but okay. And, like, they clearly don't even like each other. It's an arranged marriage. Of course she's going to be cheating with whoever. Fine. Also at the party, there were several photographers with large cameras. Flashes like small explosions kept going off as they tried to capture the room. So cameras do exist. Look, okay, I get there's a difference between a static camera and a video camera, but in this world, like, why do you need magical eyeballs? I don't know. I'm confused, I hate this, I don't know. Okay. Then there's a scene where Helena finds herself weirdly jealous when Ferron kisses his wife, which is gross considering it's immediately followed by one of the guests bringing in some prisoners to torture and kill for fun. as a party game. Ferron starts it all off by snapping the neck of a 12-year-old boy and then killing the rest of the family one by one, and this is the love interest we're meant to root for. It happened so fast everyone in the ballroom was left standing in shock, unable to process that it was already over. Helena could scarcely believe it. It didn't seem real that something like that could happen without warning. 5 people. So yeah, at this point, there's no rooting for him. I don't think there's any excuse, even, oh, they made me do it, for like murdering an entire family including a 12-year-old boy in cold blood. I just can't. There is also a scene where Helena overhears Aurelia arguing with people, saying she needs to hurry up and get pregnant because the only reason you exist is to give the Ferrons an heir. If they cast you aside, do you think anyone else would ever take you? Yay, women as objects. Yay, only valuing a woman for her uterus. I hate this book. Like, again, I would understand if this world was like more if this book was more critical of this ideology in the world. And I guess in some cases it is, but in others it feels like it just uses this blatant misogynistic crap as like a vehicle to get the main love interests together rather than critiquing that ideology behind it. Does that make sense? Anyway, Aurelia moans that Ferron won't sleep with her. Told you so, that was obvious. And the other person is like, get him drunk. Drug him if you must, or find someone else to put a child in your womb. I will not let you bring our family to ruin. So I think it's her mum saying this. He can't get drunk, Aurelia snapped. Do you think I haven't tried? I've gone to every shop, used every drug and perfume, and nothing ever works. If I get pregnant, he'll know it's not his. Yay for rape and coercion. Again, I hate this book. There's another scene of sort of weird flirting between Ferron and Helena. He stands outside her door while she sleeps. It's gross, I don't like it. It's giving Edward Cullen watching Bella, but worse. The next day, Helena goes exploring around the house again. She finds a big metal cage, as you do. Big enough for a person, it's inside a room. I'm not shocked. Whose house doesn't have a big metal cage in the office? So stupid. But no, seriously, again, if a man has a giant person-sized cage in their home, he should be automatically disqualified from being a love interest in a book. Just saying. Ferron shows up, there's some more awkward flirting that I really hate, and then he complains about his arranged marriage, and Helena says, you sound as enslaved as I am. Stop trying to pretend you're equal or the same, or... There's this whole pattern throughout this book of Helena going on about how her and Ferron are like two sides of the same coin. We're basically the same person, but on opposite sides. It's like, no, stop it. This is no Romeo and Juliet. No, hate this. You are, at this point, a literal physical prisoner who is fed slop every day. You're having magical brain experiments done on you. This guy rifles through your memories without your consent. He has physically assaulted you numerous times. He insults you constantly. You have regular seizures as a result of his torture. And if you ever did get to leave, you'd likely either be murdered on the spot or put into a breeding program. He's not enslaved like you are just because, ooh, he's in an arranged marriage that he doesn't want.
Who set that system up?
And even with what we find out about him and his backstory later, you can't even come close to calling them comparable or the same thing. Do not be stupid. Stop trying to make this murdering monster seem sympathetic because he's not. Then Ferron goes on about Luc and his family and how they were the real bad guys and they were trying to keep people like Helena isolated from everyone for who knows what reason, that's never explained. And the narrator says Ferron was a snake, trying to present himself as though he were on Helena's side, as if her morality were dictated based on who was nicest to her. Except her morality is based on who's nicest to her. That's the only thing we actually know about her so far. She has said a number of times, and I've told you to remember it, she said, I'm not religious. I don't believe in this. Hello, baby. I'm sorry, am I being loud, gorgeous boy? Hi, this is my nephew Tigger. He's beautiful, aren't you? Hi. I'm cat sitting this weekend, sorry. Hey, gorgeous. Do you want to come rant about this book with me? You thinking? Good boy. Yeah, so she said a number of times, I'm not religious. I don't believe in this religion, blah, blah, blah. She said, like, she doesn't have any political beliefs. She literally said earlier that the only reason she enlisted and was part of the resistance, the order, the whatever, the only reason she was fighting and working in this hospital was because, not out of faith, but because of Luc, because he was kind to her, and so she believed he was a good man and she'd do anything for him. They were her exact words. I hate this book. I'm glad Tigger was here to calm me down. She goes on for a while about horses and donkeys and cars and lorries, okay. And then she discovers this massive wolf monster thing in a stable of the mansion, but nothing happened. I completely forgot about this wolf monster, because again, by where I've read up to, nothing ever comes of it, so okay. She then discovers in the outside bits of this garden, there's basically a mausoleum with the ashes of Ferron's dead mother in them, and she's like, lol, guess they didn't want to make that woman immortal, or didn't want to make a woman immortal. Yeah, gorgeous boy. Bye, beautiful. Oh, I love him so much. So what does it say, right? Ironically, the one thing the guilds thought the holdfasts weren't traditional enough about was women. Girls had been welcome to study at the institute for decades. There were female lecturers, instructors, and board members in the school. So at this point, even with what we know about like the good guys and they're like forcing certain women to be sterilized and stuff like that, they're still trying to make out that no, they were actually quite progressive. They were quite good. And like, oh no, the bad guys are bad because they oppress women. It's like, well, this would be more believable if one, there weren't so many women of power on the bad guys' side. We already had Stroud and Mandel and probably some others I can't remember now. Yeah, the Mandel, the woman who locked Helena in the stasis chamber. And two, I get that these guys are awful, like the bad guys, but so are the good guys. They're all misogynistic in their own ways. They're all controlling women in their own ways. Like, I'm all for complex narratives, but, you know, I don't need these groups of people to be all good and all bad. I don't need a black and white. But this feels, in this book, less like nuance and grey areas and more like, these people are awful and we're going to tell you they're awful, but actually we're going to try and redeem them and they'll be good. And these people are the good guys, but they're actually awful, but we're not going to address any of that awful stuff and we're just going to be like, yeah, they're good. You know what I mean? I don't know. They're all crappy. I'm not rooting for anyone. It had been viewed as a fact of nature. Men of soul were active, hot and dry, full of vitality, and the source of life's seed. Women, it followed, were an inferior human form, wet and cold, passively bound to the monthly cycle of Luna, the lesser moon. While their bodies were the necessary vessels for birth, it was their blood that was the source of all defects. Both vivimancy and necromancy were regarded as a corruption of resonance caused by a poisonous womb. Hence, the attempts from both sides to control women in their pregnancies. It's gross, we hate it. I do think this is a really interesting thing to include in the book, and it would be great to see some more exploration of this, some more criticisms of this going forward, but there's not. There might be in the third part, so I'll hold my hands up and say it might be coming up, but for now, in the first 2/3, they don't look at this as in-depth or as thoughtfully as I would like. However, not all women were doomed to cold passivity. To avoid such categorization, a girl could devote herself to the cult of Lumithia, a goddess of warfare and alchemy who had been born from the heart of Sol. Women associated with Lumithia were not expected to be traditional. They could be alchemists, surgeons, paladins, anything, but there was a price. Were they to marry or bear children, they had to give it all up. Lumithia was a virgin goddess. Mothers and married women were not welcome at her altar. So even this is still about controlling women and telling them that they cannot have it all if they want to. Again, I hoped this would be explored and critiqued more, but it's just not really at all. And also, this is where I was confused, right? Because, okay, in my original script, I said, wasn't Helena an alchemist, but she was dating Luke? Maybe they were going to do like a switcheroo and be like, oh, just kidding. They were never dating. She was just obsessed with him. I don't know. But like, it turns out they didn't even do that. They just like, they built it all up so it seemed like they were in a relationship, but then they weren't at all. So then I was like, I don't know. I'm tired. I'm really tired. We skip forward to another scene of magical brain surgery, and guess what? Helena passes out again. Drink. Oh, gosh. And I'm gonna go take another break now. I know I'm taking a lot of breaks in this filming. I am a little bit allergic to cats, even though I love them to bits and I'm looking after them, so I need to go take my antihistamines and breathe again. So I'm gonna go do that. I'll be back in a while, maybe later tonight. I'll see you soon. Okay, day 2 of filming, let's do this. And I apologise if the first part of this video is out of focus. I didn't realise my lens was on manual focus because I'm a silly goose and it never is, but I think it got knocked in my bag on my way here to my sister's. So hopefully this will actually be in focus today. I have a lot of hair going on. So where were we? Right, okay. Helena is reading a newspaper. I'm gonna tie my hair up actually because I feel scruffy. Give me a second. I'm such a mess at the minute. It'll do. I'll do. Right, this is fine. So Helena is busy reading newspapers and she keeps reading them over the weeks. And in one of them in particular, there's more on the baby farms. The repopulation program, which had initially been treated as an economic necessity, was gradually reframed as a new scientific frontier. New Palladia would forge its own future. No longer would alchemical repertoires be left to chance. Parentage in the program was to be selected based on the strength and variety of residents. Tests were being done to discover the ideal combinations. Scientific terminology and the overuse of words like genius and groundbreaking tried to frame the program as if it were an obvious next step. There were never any explanations about where these assets would go or who'd raise them, or that they were people, just that they would exist and be industrially and economically valuable resources. When I first read this, I was like, why is this legitimately something that like Reform would want if they were in power? Why is this like what so many pro-life Republicans would do in America, or what they are doing in America? Meanwhile, Aurelia, the child wife, is having an affair with a man named Lancaster, who is also showing a lot of interest in Helena. And he was shocked when she didn't recognize him. He's like, how do you not know who I am? So clearly they've interacted at some point during her memory loss. cat hair in the air. Yeah, this is just another mystery that I don't care about and I actually forgot was in here completely. I forgot Lancaster was even a character, so there we go. Helena thinks he must be a spy and he's secretly working for her side, but I really doubt it. And her first thought is like, oh my god, he must be here to rescue me. And I'm like, how naive are you? You're stupid. Stroud turns up and gives Helena a medical exam and says that she's malnourished and they need to feed her better. Then the exam continues and guess what? Helena passes out again. Drink. We've got another one today just for the drinking game. I really hope none of you are playing this with alcohol because I do not want to be responsible for the state of your livers. So Helena has more dreams, which are her old memories coming back, and she keeps forgetting people. So she had Luke, who was the guy in charge, her roommate Lila or Lila, I think it's Lila, who was a paladin, and then her twin brother Soren, who was also a paladin, and she keeps forgetting that he exists for some reason. She remembers like Luke and Lila a lot more, but Soren, she's like, oh yeah, I forgot he was there, which is interesting, I guess. I don't know. I forgot that this was a plot point. In the next chapter, she manages to finally steal a knife and she tries to attack Ferron, but he's got a chest as hard as granite. So she's like, screw it, if I can't attack him, I'll just try and kill myself. And she tries to slice her own throat, but he uses magic to stop her. And the whole scene, as it plays out on paper, is not half as exciting as it could be, or it should be, or I want it to be. Mostly because I don't give a damn about these characters, and also because like it's just rushed through. There's no tension, like no tension at all. Then there's a big political event that happens because someone, an unknown person, tries to shoot some governor on the bad guy's side, but it misses him and kills Mandel instead. Mandel is the woman who imprisoned Helena in the stasis tank and then got killed by Morrow and then put in a new body. Now she's been like killed and can't be put into a new body. She's like dead. And this creates some uproar because Mandel died in front of a crowd of reporters and international visitors, citizens and foreign dignitaries. One of the Undying, whose appearance marked her as undeniably and visibly among the immortal, died. I was confused by this because like before, when like she died, they just took this metal out of her chest and put it into another body. So I think that metal is like her soul or something like that, and they just put it in there. And I was like, can you not do that again? Or are there rules to this? Like, it needs to go in a new body within a certain amount of time, it needs to go in a certain type of body, there's only so many times you can do that? Or was this like an assassination attempt that like broke that metal and killed her? I don't know, it's not really explained. In the next scene with Stroud though, I'm so sorry, I feel like I'm just doing and because that's what this book is. Well, actually, I've got a little thing I want to talk about this later, but I will just say, the book is just a series of kind of, not necessarily disconnected scenes, but well, no, they are disconnected. They're just like, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. It just feels boring. Stroud comes back and examines Helena again. So Helena learns from Stroud that the Undying frequently develop a tendency towards sadism over time, some more quickly than others. The Undying had always seemed psychotic, but Helena hadn't realised it was a side effect of the immortality. And like, I'm sorry, no. You can't tell me you're going to try and redeem these monsters by being like, they can't help it, it's just in their nature, it's just who they are, it's a medical side effect, it's not their fault. Like, I don't care. You're still responsible for your actions, even if like you're well, you know what, this is something that I've actually thought a lot about, and I've got a short essay about it in my last book, Outside, and there's also a poem about it too called Jellyfish, and it's the shortest poem in the book, but I also think it's the most ambiguous, because a lot of my poems I do this kind of like storytelling and I spin this narrative and like you follow a story throughout the poem, but there's like an underlying meaning and message there, and it's usually an analogy for something else. But in this is a little bit more kind of abstract. There's still a slight narrative there, but it's also a little bit more ambiguous than some of the others. So like, if you don't mind, I'll read you the poem, and if you like it, it's available in my book Outside, which is available as an ebook and a physical hardback copy, which is like a big chunky book of like 300 pages. It's a big tall book like this. It's full of photos, paintings, other artwork. It's got essays, it's got poetry in, it's a little bit of everything. And if you buy the physical copy of the book, you also get a code in the back, so you can get a free copy of the audiobook from my website as well. Just because I know the hardback's a little expensive, so I want to give people who want that like little something extra as well. I wish it wasn't so expensive, it's just printing costs. I'm sorry, I don't make much money on it, but you know. Right, so yeah, my poem Jellyfish is kind of about this whole like, are people really responsible for their actions or not? Or does the outcome matter more? It's, yeah, mindless little jelly, floating up and down. No care or choice or brain in there, and you can't make a sound. So if somebody touches you, there's no concept of consent, there's no negotiation, but chemicals are sent. A stinging, sharp sensation, pain you did not mean to cause, for it's just in your nature, but it's not in your thoughts. You drift without a memory, so do you even have a past? Oh, can we blame you, little jelly, for lashing out so fast. So obviously it's a simple poem, it's just a little whatever, but it's about a jellyfish sting, obviously, but it's also a big analogy for people who have these like quick emotional reactions without having the time to logically or emotionally process what they're doing. It's about people who hurt people even when they don't intend to, and how sometimes we need to ask, well, can we really blame them if they're acting out of instinct or ignorance? But also it's about how even if you didn't intend to hurt someone, the person that you did hurt still has to live with those consequences. You might not blame the person for doing it, or you might, but the person who is injured or hurt, whether that's physically or emotionally, still has to live with the sting. They still have to live with the consequences of that. They still have to go through the pain and the suffering and the trauma. You know, a jellyfish or a person might lash out and sting you, and that's not intentional on their part, because, you know, they have no brain, they didn't think it through. It's not like they even have an awareness of what they did was wrong. So, you know, can you really blame them? But when you think about it like that, you have to ask, well, like, does blame really matter? Because ultimately that person is stung and in pain, and the jellyfish might not still be aware of it, but the pain is still there, you know? And I think that's kind of what this part of the book reminded me of. Like, I get these people might be living with what is essentially a health condition that makes them sadistic. However, that's not an excuse for what they do. That doesn't erase the harm they're doing. That doesn't stop them inflicting trauma on people. I think you can understand someone and their motives, or lack of, without condoning it or excusing their actions. So for example, if we know that these people have this like health condition that makes them sadists, we might not blame them for their actions, but we can still be like, well, I don't condone your actions. You are still objectively doing harm, you know, murdering people, slavery, cannibalism, eugenics. So you can be like, yep, I understand why you're doing this. I understand that, but you're not condoning it, and you're not like letting them off the hook, and you're not saying like, oh, well, you know, you can't help it, so just carry on. It's more like, okay, I understand you can't help it, but let's figure out a way to stop this, you know, to stop the harm. Anyway, so that's what this whole little passage made me think of, and I hoped that the book would try to explore this a little more and doesn't just do the whole like, oh, but it's not their fault, so I guess we can forgive them nonsense. I don't want these literal evil monsters to just be made out to be the victims in all this. Even if it is like a health condition, like a side effect of their magical immortality, they're still humans. They're not like a jellyfish who literally have no brain. Like, they're still humans with like sentience and a consciousness. Well, actually, I was going to say they have free will, but there's an argument against that too. But in a practical sense, they at least have the illusion of free will, or free will, depending on what you believe. Like, people do have choices over what they do and their actions. So like, you know, even if you have a biological tendency towards X, Y, or Z, you can absolutely choose not to act on that, usually. There's probably some exceptions, but like on the whole, I'd say like, you know, even if you have a biological tendency towards sadism, that doesn't mean you have to hurt people. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if I'm making sense now. I'm just rambling. Okay, like, and look, okay, I mean, I get it. Books don't have to be morally perfect. A writer can absolutely write a character that they don't agree with. I get that. But if a book has a crappy message that seems to be glamorizing or excusing violent or harmful behavior, then I still have a right to criticize that and be like, I think this is a crappy message. And yeah, and I think I mentioned this a little bit yesterday, but I was saying like, for me, the thing that I hate most is not when an author writes a morally dark character. I think that can be really, really interesting. That can be really entertaining, you know? Look at I just reviewed Yesteryear a little bit back on my channel. I think I mentioned yesterday, John Fowles' The Collector is written at least partially from the perspective of this like horrific stalker and kidnapper. I've been really enjoying the Time of Iron books at the minute because it's my guilty pleasure. I keep saying this, it's great. That does a really fun job of examining the difference between enjoying an evil character in a book and experiencing those actions in real life. And all the characters are really nuanced and complex, and it's really, really fun, and I love that. And the main character kind of goes into it with like, oh, it's fiction. Fiction doesn't matter. Anyone can do anything in fiction, and I can enjoy the evilness, and it doesn't mean anything. And then when she's actually put into that world and has to experience it, she's like, oh crap, this is not what I thought. This is not as consequence-free and harmless as I thought it was. And I think that's a really kind of fun examination of all of that. So I think having evil characters and bad characters can be a fun thing, but what I just personally hate, and I think a lot of people kind of mistake my rants for me being like, oh, we should ban all this. No, I'm not saying we should ban any books. I'm not saying we should stop people writing them or whatever. But what I am saying is that, like, I personally do not like this and never will, probably. What I just personally hate and have criticised a lot over the years and will continue to criticise is when an author writes an awful character but doesn't understand that the person they're writing is awful, and they try and romanticise the character and their behaviour. So, for example, they romanticise and glamorise and sexualise and, like, kind of hype up a bit rapists, torturers, stalkers, or whatever. Or in this case, mass murderers. I don't know. I have no problems with those kinds of characters being in books, but I do have an issue with books acting like those actions are forgivable or redeemable or sexy, because it's not sexy. I'm not saying I want those books banned, like I say, but I am saying I see massive problems with them and will continue to voice my disgust of that. And also, just like on a personal level, like if I know, for example, you're into books that like sexualize and romanticize and eroticize rape, I'll probably be like, okay, if you enjoy getting off to seeing a woman be violently raped, I'm probably not going to feel safe around you, you know? And I think that's just a personal thing for me. Anyway, I've ranted enough. Okay, back to the story. This is why my videos are so long, because I can't shut up. So back to the story, and Stroud says that the High Necromancer wants to see Helena again. So you guessed it, in order to get her there, she's knocked out. How many times has she been unconscious at this point? Seriously. Okay, Helena goes to see Morrow, and did I mention, stupid name, it's spelt Morrow like M-O-R-R-O-U-G-H, for those of you who are listening to the audio-only version. Morrow. Like, I get it, but I don't like it. I don't like it. Anyway, Morrow lay reclined upon a throne of bodies, necrothralls, contorted and twisted together, their limbs transmuted and fused into a chair, moving in synchrony. Okay, synchrony, where are you going with that? I thought it would be synchronicity, no? First thing that comes up, synchrony versus synchronicity. Oh no, I'm completely wrong with this. Synchrony is about two or more things occurring simultaneously, often in a mechanical way, where synchronicity is a psychological concept referring to meaningful coincidences that have no causal link. I did not know that. Learn something new every day. Okay, completely right. Ignore me then. Necrothralls contorted and twisted together, their limbs transmuted and fused into a chair, moving in synchrony, rising and falling as they breathed in tandem, squeezing and releasing around him. Morrow seemed shrunken somehow from the immense distorted being he'd been. Now he looked as though the skin was rotting off him. I wonder if Morrow was hot, if people would be lusting after him too. Anyway, he decides to look through Helena's memories, because, like, apparently just everyone can do that in this world. And she's in pain, she's screaming again, it's just another torture scene. Maybe at this point we should have been drinking every time Helena screams too, because that would really, like, if you're playing it with water, that'd get you daily 8 glasses or whatever it is, wouldn't it, in no time. Anyway, after he's done, he's like, oh, didn't you realize Helena must be the Eternal Flame's Animancer? When before he thought it was this Elaine Boyle person, but now apparently it's Helena. But didn't we already, like, suspect it was Helena? I don't know. I don't know. There is only one answer. She is the Animancer. Even now, with her resonance all but gone, she's still resisting. She erased her memory of what she is in an attempt to escape me. And again, they say it as like some sort of revelation, but I thought we'd already figured it out before, so I'm confused. I don't know. Okay. Ferron is like, I beg your forgiveness for my failure. I never considered it. But again, I thought, isn't that why they sent her to him in the first place? Because they suspected this? No, apparently it was just to try and, like, get the memories, but I don't know. I don't know. I think my first time reading through this, I was like, okay, there's like a bunch of like things with this Elaine person and whatever and blah blah blah, but like I'm pretty sure because Helena's the main character it's going to be her, right? And I thought this was kind of obvious. And then as the book went on, I was like, oh yeah, they're just like alluding to this, and then they do this like it's a big reveal, and I was like, what? I thought we already knew. I don't know. I was confused my first time reading it, and I had to go back and reread, and then I was like, okay, I don't know. Okay. I think I said this earlier, they just kept going on about how you have to know someone completely to be able to do this and rewrite their brain like this. So surely the implication was that the only person who could have known herself so completely was herself. No? I don't know. Anyway, then there's some discussion around who killed Mandel, and they're sure it was someone from the Order and that they used an obsidian weapon to kill her. So I guess at this point we're learning that obsidian is the bad guy's weakness. Cool. I've just realised now within the first 600 pages of this book, this never comes up again. So I'm sure it might towards the end, but okay. Also, don't you think it seems silly to discuss this in front of Helena when you now think she's like super powerful and you know she used to work for the Order and like is still on their side and like why would you be like discussing your entire people's only weakness that can actually kill them in front of an enemy? It's so silly. Anyway, there is also the revelation that Helena ended up in the stasis chamber because she was trying to rescue her roommate Paladin Lila from a prison or some experimentation lab or something like that. Back at the mansion, happen, and Helena realizes that Mandel isn't the first of the Undying to be killed. They've actually been dying for weeks, and she realizes this because people have been disappearing from the society pages of the newspaper she reads. Okay, I guess. She confronts Ferron about this, and he says they must be trying to cover it up. Then she info dumps all this stuff that she's apparently figured out. So her doing all her thinking, this has all happened off page, and now we're just getting all these revelations like dumped on us. This is like the first thing she's actively done in the book, is read and think. So this is what she says. When the Undying are in their dead bodies, they don't retain their old resonance. They get whatever resonance their new body has. Like your father. He's an iron alchemist. He doesn't know anything about pyromancy. So if someone like you, an animancer, lost their body, you'd lose the ability, and if you thought being a lich was a punishment, something you do to teach someone a lesson, you'd cling to your body no matter what condition it was in and be desperate to figure out transference. But even if you did, you'd still need to find an animancer. But someone like that would fight the transference. So that's where the repopulation program comes in. Morrow doesn't care about the economy or what kind of alchemists there are in New Palladia. The real reason Stroud's using selective breeding is to find a way to control what resonance children are born with. That's why they brought back your father, and I saw him in Central. She's trying to produce an animancer for Morrow. If transference is perfected by the time she does, he'd have the means and the perfect vessel to use, but he's running out of time. Something's wrong about him. He's too old, and that should affect the resonance, but it hasn't with him. He's got some other source for his power, something he can draw from, but he's deteriorating anyway. I saw him only a few months ago and he wasn't like that. The throne is keeping him alive. Maybe the source of his power is right in front of us, but it's been disguised so that people wouldn't realise. Perhaps it's presented as a gift, something people are desperate to earn, but really he's the one that needs it. The Undying, you're the source of his power, and the Resistance, we figured that out, didn't we? How to kill him, how to kill all of you. Okay, so in summary, I think they're trying to like breed new magical babies and then perfect this transference thing so these like old dying people like Morrow can like transfer their souls into these new babies. And you can't do it when they're older because they'd resist it. So you need to do it when they're young and can't resist it. But then you're a baby and I don't know, I see flaws in this plan, but okay. Or maybe I'm just not understanding it. I'm very confused. So Morrow himself gets his power from like his little minions, and when he gives them immortality, they give him something which is what's giving him power and keeping him alive. That bit's a bit more simple. The chapter ends here though, and we learn in the next chapter that immediately after saying all of this and like coming to these conclusions, instead of doing something about it or having a back and forth conversation with Ferron, she just she passes out. It's ridiculous. Well, okay, technically she has a seizure and then passes out and Ferron just leaves her, but it's still passing out. To be fair, my only experience with seizures was with my little Kyra Bean, and when she was ill. She had quite a lot in the beginning, and then her medicine seemed to work, and then it stopped working and got really bad again towards the end. But yeah, so that's my only experience with seizures, but even I know, like, they have the seizure and they're not aware they're having it, and then afterwards there's, like, a recovery period where they're back in consciousness, and they're like, whoa, what just happened? And it's all very confusing. And then afterwards, Carrie's to sleep for a really, really long time, because seizures are not just, like, mentally draining, but they're physically really exhausting as well. Like, her little paws used to shake, her whole body used to shake, her jaw used to lock up, and she'd be dribbling and spitting everywhere. It was, oh god, it's the most horrible, heartbreaking thing to see. But like that sort of like physical, you know, the shakes and the activity, like that is physically draining. And like the vet said, like her muscles would have ached so much afterwards, like all her muscles, her full body of muscles. Plus it's really exhausting on the brain, like, and then she's trying to figure out what happened. It's just like, yeah. So she did have to sleep for a long time afterwards. So I get why when she passed out after the seizure, Ferron just left her for a while, because like he knew she wouldn't be waking up for a bit. But I don't know, like when it was the Kyra, like I could not leave her after she'd had a seizure at all. I'd always be like there with her, and she'd just be fast asleep, and I'm like, I'm here, I'm watching, you're safe. Anyway, while Helena is, but sorry, just sad trauma dumping on you there a little bit, but like that's my experience with seizures, so I get it a little bit. Right, where were we? Okay, while she is passed out, Helena has another memory come back. This time she is being told she's exceptional at everything magic related, and she should have a nickel titanium weapon if she wants one. Hopefully this will be relevant at some point. Now thinking about it, having read more, we do actually see this exact scene later. And there is, I don't know, something does come of it, I guess. I don't know, we'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there, we'll see. Then there's a few boring pages, and it says this. Ferron was constantly busy, spending most of his time trying to hunt down the last members of the Eternal Flame. When she did happen to see him from the courtyard windows, he looked visibly ground down. Sometimes he came back covered in blood. She began to suspect that Morrow was torturing him regularly. Since Ferron couldn't stay dead, Morrow got the pleasure of killing him over and over. And I was a little confused here, because I was like, since when was it established that Ferron was like one of the Undying, you know? Because we know that people can work for the Undying without actually being immortal, because Stroud told us, I'm not immortal, I just work for them. And this whole book so far, we've had little scenes of Helena being like, well, what is he? Is he immortal or is he not? I don't know. And now it's like just accepted out of nowhere with like no new knowledge, like, oh yeah, he's immortal and he must be being tortured and killed and brought back to life over and over and over. Okay. I mean, I still don't really understand how the immortality in this book works. Maybe we'll get an explanation in part 3. I don't know. We'll see. It just feels, I don't know, maybe I'm stupid. She goes on to say, or the author goes on to say, she tried not to notice. When she couldn't help it, she tried not to care. He'd chosen this life after all. Morrow was dying and Ferron knew it, yet he still chose to serve him, carrying out everything that Morrow now lacked the strength to do himself. He deserved to suffer. I mean, like, yeah, he's a mass murderer. He's regularly torturing you. Sorry if I don't pity him. Then we actually get a scene where Helena gets her period for the first time. When she found spots of blood between her legs, she sat staring in total incomprehension until it dawned on her that she was menstruating. Even before the war, the stress of her scholarship had kept her irregular. It stopped completely after the assassination. See, she knew about the assassination! Okay, never mind. She had forgotten that it was something her body was supposed to do. When she'd been sterilized, Matthias had wanted her womb removed, but Ilva had insisted that the procedure be as non-invasive as possible, a ligature, which meant she could still bleed. So there were many choices that the author could have gone for when choosing how to sterilize Helena here. It concerns me that she chose the most reversible one, because this makes me think they're going to reverse it and force a pregnancy on her. That was my worry at this point. I said in my original script, it makes me worry that we're going to end up with a forced pregnancy plot at some point, but I really, really hope this isn't the case. Later, in a scene with Ferron, he asks, you know, I wonder sometimes who's responsible for more resistance deaths, Holdfast and his morals, or me? What do you think? It's not the same. His fingers twitched. He almost managed to hide it by crossing his arms. Is there really a difference between having someone die for you and killing them? Yes. But, I mean, this would be an interesting kind of morality discussion to have, but it just doesn't really go any further, you know? I feel like Ferron and the author writing about Ferron are trying to be like, see, he's not so bad, he's just like the hero. But I can't help but come back to this, like, well, actually both sides seem awful position. It's why, like, I'm never gonna support any wars or anything like that, because I feel like while asking people to fight and die for you is bad and, like, you know, not good morally, it's awful, you are responsible for those deaths, I still feel like it's different. It's like a different kind of bad to physically going out there and murdering people, you know? Both are bad, but they're different. Both are bad, but my brain is not working today. You know what I'm trying to say. You can probably have some more in-depth discussions about this than me down in the comments, because my brain is just mush today. I'm so sorry. Yeah, go on. Leave me your thoughts. I think it'll be very interesting to read, and I'm very excited to hear what you all think. One of the things I hate is this idea that, like, oh, well, we've both done bad things, therefore, like, if I do bad things too, it doesn't matter because so did you. You know, they're both bad things, and even if one's worse than the other, it doesn't matter because they're both bad and now we're both as bad as each other. I don't like that. I really don't like that. Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say. I don't know anymore. I'm so tired. Ferron then goes on about how he doesn't believe he has a conscience and he hates so many people. He's just so unlikable. He's not even an interesting villain, you know, he's just unpleasant. Even with what we learn about him in part 2 of this book and how they try to develop his character, I just don't find him interesting, and I don't find him sympathetic in any way. He seems just like cartoon evil, and then the author's like, no, I'm gonna try and redeem him, but he's still just cartoon evil. I will say I don't think this book is for me. Anyway, then there is another party in the mansion, and this time, while snooping around, Helena overhears the guests bragging about raping women as part of the forced pregnancy thing to create more magicians. It is sickening, like completely sickening, and this part for me really makes these people irredeemable. And like people like Ferron, who, like, he knows this is happening and he's not speaking up against it. That makes him irredeemable for me. You know, I feel like if you knew someone in real life who was like, oh yeah, all my friends and colleagues are going out every day and raping women, and I am like the second highest rank in this company that forces the rape of women, and I am upholding this company that rapes women, like, that's not redeemable in any way, is it? Let's be real. One of the guys who has been doing the raping says, always glad to perform my civic duty. Palladia can never have too many alchemists, replied a leering voice. Stroud lets you have anyone you want? Well, the sly voice replied, it probably depends on your repertoire. She'll give you a list of room numbers to choose from. There's this one girl, pretty thing, scars weren't too bad. Little bitch managed to bite me, but she was very cooperative after I broke her jaw. I told Stroud to let it heal the old-fashioned way. There was a dramatic sigh. I'll go back again this week and make sure she's knocked up. And if not, I guess I'll try again. I rather hope it didn't take. I think I'll like her better with her mouth wired shut. Like I say, Ferron says he hasn't done it himself, But again, you're standing by and letting all this happen, especially when you're in a position of power that's letting this happen. Like, you are part of the problem. You are the problem. Again, that's not something that's redeemable, just standing by and letting this happen. They all talk about how this person from the Order is killing people to mimic the murders of people in the Order who were killed. Yeah, okay, that was it. So the Undying killed a bunch of people in the Order of the Eternal Flame, and now whoever is killing members of the Undying are doing it to mimic those murders, apparently. Again, I forgot this was even a plot point because I'm so invested. I'm so uninvested in this, I don't care. Helena obviously feels sick because, yep, that's pretty gross. And she's sad at the thought of all the women from the Resistance or Order who've been captured and are being raped, because, you know, I think that's the normal reaction to hearing about mass rape and forced pregnancy, isn't it? Disgust and horror, not just, well, I didn't do it myself, so looking at you, Ferron. However, Helena does lose me a bit when she thinks that there's so many because, well, there had been so many women in the Resistance. Not many in combat, but everywhere else. They'd staffed the hospital, gone to the front lines as field medics, and dragged the wounded bodies to safety. Operated the radios, and you do have radios! And relayed messages, washed and repaired the clothes and uniforms, and cooked the meals. All the ordinary tasks that never ended, not even when a war began. It had been the women doing them. So yeah, typical little whamming jobs, right? I don't like this. This idea that, like, well, yeah, the Resistance had a lot of women, so they're better than the Undying, but then you're forcing the women to do, like, cooking, cleaning, healing, sewing, because that's all women are good for, right? Apparently. And now, just being raped and impregnated. Again, both sides are oppressing women in different ways. The underlying misogyny in this book concerns me for, like, the author and their views, because, like, it feels like passages like this about how, like, oh yeah, the women were, like, so important to the Resistance and they did this and this and this and this, and, like, yeah, those are important jobs, but being like, they're only the ones that women can do. Women are only good for these jobs unless you want to give up being a wife and mother, and then you might be able to do that. Like, that's and that being painted as a good thing and a positive, and why the Resistance is somehow better than the Undying bothers me quite a bit. At this point, I am open to changing my mind when we get to part 3, because that's the only bit I haven't read yet, so let's see where this goes. But we have a couple of hours of video to make before then. Anyway, as she's spying from the party, that guy from earlier that Aurelia is having the affair with, Lancaster, he finds her and attacks her and threatens to rape her because he's a monster, and then he sticks a needle in her neck to incapacitate her, and I thought, she's gonna pass out? She doesn't. For once, she does not pass out. Put those drinks down. Instead, he drags outside and through the gate, and then he makes disgusting rape threats like, "Gods, I'm gonna turn you inside out." Sick. They're stopped by Ferron, who just casually stuffs his fist inside Lancaster's stomach, not the chest, I thought it was chest, and he pulls out his intestines, and then Lancaster just grumbles and stumbles away with his organs hanging out. And the thing is, like, this is not a man who's immortal, by the way. Lancaster is just a regular guy, like, not an immortal guy. So you want me to believe that he just had his guts pulled out, and then he just walks away, and he's like, oof, I guess I'll go to hospital now. No. Ferron takes, well, I mean, it happens, but Ferron takes Helena back up to her room and agrees to clean her wounds and stuff, and she says that he knows he won't hurt her now because she knew he wouldn't. He only hurt her on certain days, and this wasn't one of them, so she sat very still. What kind of nonsense is this? This is exactly the kind of thing that abuse victims tell themselves. As someone who was in an abusive relationship, this is the sort of nonsense you tell yourself, like, oh, well, he'll only hurt me if I do these things. He'll only shout if I do these things. It was my fault that he hurt me in this way because of this and this. So if I do this, he won't hurt me. I know I'm safe today because he didn't do this, or I didn't do this, and it's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Can we not romanticize this, please? He then leaves and he locks her in her room for her own safety. That's right, punish the victim and not the attempted rapist, I guess. Although, well, no, he does go and punish the rapist, but we'll get there. The next day, she kept thinking about the girls in the repopulation program, lured in by the promise of food and pardon. If Helena hadn't been sterilized and missing memories, she'd be there too. Compared with what the rest of the survivors suffered, Ferron was almost kind. It was such a horrible thought. Again, it's this comparison that makes it so harmful with, oh, well, you know, he's torturing me, and, like, I'm having these seizures because of what he's doing to me, and I'm locked up here, and I'm being fed slop, and I'm getting, like, you know, all this, like, torture and attacks and attempted rape on me, but at least I'm not being raped by multiple men, so I guess it's actually quite no. What he's doing to you is still horrible, it's still awful. Aurelia comes into the room to info dump a tragic backstory showing how evil the evil side are. She says, "Did you know I was the third daughter my mother had? People thought there was something wrong with Kaine when he was born. Thought maybe he was a lapse, which means he doesn't have magic, or he didn't have an iron resonance. No one was sure, just knew the family was secretive about him. My father saw an opportunity uni. My mother and father were cousins, incest. He thought they could easily have a girl with pure iron resonance, and the Ferrons would be desperate to marry Kaine to her to stay in control of the guild. Again, that should not be a full stop. Mother said the first two were tiny, little bits of things. My father paid a Vivimancer to come in early to see if they were girls, but when they didn't show any signs of iron resonance in the womb, he didn't let her keep them. If they'd come to term, he said another iron family might beat us to the marriage contract. I was the third girl. My mother always said the first two babies were hers, I was Kaine Ferron's. She burned them in the fireplace and buried the ashes in the garden, spent all her time out there with them. At least this is being portrayed as a bad thing, so that's good. But like, what is it with this book and taking away women's control of their reproductive rights consistently? It's just a lot at this point. But you know, at least it is being portrayed as a bad thing, so there's that. There's a lot of awful stuff in this book, and some is said to be as bad as it obviously is, and some is romanticized. But overall, it's just not pleasant to read, because even when things are shown to be like, oh, this is bad, it kind of feels sometimes like the amount of torture and pain that women go through in this book, it just kind of feels like the author's enjoying writing about the torture of women, and it's just a bit uncomfortable, you know? I don't know. Anyway, then she shows Helena a story in the newspaper about Ferron killing Lancaster in public, and Aurelia's like, yay, he's done it for me because he found out about our affair. But then she realizes it's not because he's jealous about the affair, it's because of what Lancaster did to Helena, and then Aurelia gets super jealous of her. It's all a bit stupid. And I'm confused because, like, why did Ferron attack him outside the house, pull out his intestines, and then let him go away to the hospital, and then show up at the hospital and kill him there in public? Why not just kill him immediately outside your house? Why did you have to wait and then like do it with a big audience? This seems stupid. I don't know. Also, what kind of newspaper publishes photos of a violent murder? Because that's what this one did. Wild. So as a consequence of this, thankfully something happening because something happened, not just and then, Aurelia decides to go crazy since Ferron is away and out of the house and off at some meeting or whatever, and she decides, I hate you, Helena, I'm gonna get my revenge by plucking out your eyes for reasons. I don't know why. Okay, so she's literally like got a knife and she's like digging around in Helena's eye socket. Like, again, we're seeing this on page. It's okay, right, fine. When Ferron, who has been watching this whole scene from his little magical eye cameras, like his eyeball cameras, he's like, oh no, and he magically, telepathically sends the dead bodies after Aurelia to stop her from killing Helena, and then he uses his long distance magic to make the Iron House attack Aurelia, and I thought he killed her, and I was like, yay for killing your wife. Yay for women attacking women over men. I hate this. And so Ferron has been like running back and he's in a car. I don't know how, but he gets there really quick and he's just like, and when he gets there, Helena's eye is hanging out of the socket, and then Aurelia is in this like iron cage, and I thought she was dead, but apparently she's not actually dead. But if she's not actually dead, she has iron magic herself, so why didn't she just be like, whoop, get out of the cage? I don't know either. So Ferron running back and he's like, you're a healer, teach me how to magically fix your eye. And then she does, and bam, his eyes are back to normal and fine. All is well in the world. He goes to check on his wife, and somehow he like gets her out of the cage or brings her back to life or something, or maybe she was just knocked out. I don't know. I don't care. But she's out of the cage and alive now somehow. And he threatens to torture her and says, I've tried to be patient with you, Aurelia. I've been willing to overlook your indecent behavior and petty interferences. But do remember, aside from being somewhat decorative, you are useless to me. If you ever go near her again or speak to her or so much as set foot in this wing again, I will kill you. I will do it slowly, perhaps over the course of an evening or two. That isn't a threat. It's a promise. Now get out of my sight. I know we're meant to hate Aurelia, and I know she did just torture Helena. Yes, that's awful. We don't like her. But I'm never going to be in support of or rooting for a man who just threatens to torture and kill his wife for not following his rules. Like I say, I'm not excusing anything she did to Helena, but I don't think violence is the answer to violence. And I don't think you make Ferron out to be this like good guy who will do anything to protect Helena by making him into someone who threatens to kill his wife, when so many women are dying like that around the world today, and that's like a very real threat for people, you know? Aurelia, bless her, she's been like probably as a child forced into this arranged marriage, and now her husband's threatening to kill her. Like, I'm sorry, but she's also the victim here. She's also a bad guy, but she's also a victim. For some reason, after this whole attack, he makes Helena sleep in a different room now. A point is made to say this room has radiators, so there are radiators in this world. Again, what level of technology they have, I don't understand. There are radios, right? We heard earlier there are radios, yet later, notes and messages have to be passed along by handwritten letter. Why, if you have Okay, fine. Okay, we're back to film, and I've just realised we're about to cover the worst bit in the first part of this book. This makes me so, this whole next section from now to the end of part 1, worst bit of the entire book so far. I hate this so much. So, we skip forward in time a little bit, and Stroud comes to visit again, and reveals something that I can't stand. Helena's vision was still imbalanced, making things swing out of focus as Stroud began examining her. Stroud noted something in her file and then made Helena lie back and spend more than a minute kneading her stomach and lower abdomen. Perfect, Stroud said finally, stepping back and taking several more notes. You're finally ready. Ready for what? Enrollment in my repopulation program. I was sterilized. Yeah, I know. Stroud just nodded. I believe I may be the first Vivimancer to manage a full ligation reversal. Can we please just stop controlling a person's uterus for once? Please. I would love it. All that stuff I said earlier about liking that a sterilized woman was being represented in at least what they call a romance novel, I take it all back. This feels like an even bigger insult. The only thing in my mind that is worse than forcing a sterilization on a person is forcing a sterilization and then forcing the reverse of it. And then forcing pregnancy, because we know that's gonna happen. Oh, I hate it. I hate this. Helena tried to make herself breathe steadily. If she started hyperventilating, Stroud would probably sedate her or knock her out completely. So at least at this point, she's a little bit aware of how much she's passed out in this book so far. And then to make matters worse, Stroud turns to Ferron and says, to him, it's time you had children. As our other Animancer, the High Necromancer has chosen you to be the first to make an attempt with Marino here. If she becomes pregnant, we'll look for signs of animancy. So now we're going on to we're not only like controlling her uterus in terms of like, can she have kids or not, but we're forcing who she has kids with, and we're gonna force rape on her. So not only is she being held as a kidnap victim by him and being physically tortured by him, but she's gonna be raped by him and impregnated by him. And people call this romance. And the thing is, like, at least they acknowledge it as rape. Helena says, you're having me raped, and you expect me to be grateful about it. Helena's voice was dead, coming from far away. Stroud's expression soured. I'm giving you an opportunity for your life to mean something. I would really love to throw this book across the room, but sadly I've been reading the ebook version, so I can't do that. There's a lot of screaming and crying. Obviously, I think most of us would react in the same way, right? I just don't understand why so many of these books that are marketed as like fantasy romance or romantasy just spend page after page finding ways to torture women in like more and more disgusting, disturbing ways. I don't see the appeal. Like, I don't know about you, but I prefer reading books where my main characters have agency and do things and go places and aren't just repetitively tortured for, how much has it been so far? 240 pages of pure torture so far, and it only carries on. We've got another 780-ish to go. Helena is obviously terrified. Understandably. She flicks her fingers, wishing she could move her hand inside her body as easily as Ferron had into Lancaster's belly. She'd rip out her organs right there in the bed. You know what? First time Helena's been relatable to me, because same with my uterus issues and the pain issues I have. Oh, there are days where I'm just like, I will dig it out with a spatula if I have to. Oh gosh, yes, I relate. I don't want this thing. Then, horrifically, and I'm not going to read you the details here because it's unpleasant, we get a graphic scene of Ferron raping Helena. I'll be honest, like, I know we had trigger warnings saying there would be rape in here, but I didn't know it would be rape between the main love interests. And if it was, if I'd known it was going down this path, I don't think I would have picked up the book, and I don't think I would have chosen to review it. This is my fault for deciding to go in blind, but I guess, you know, screw me for thinking that an award-winning fantasy book wouldn't have the main love interests raping each other. Yeah, okay. The thing is, like, Ferron clearly doesn't want to do it. He's been coerced into this by his bosses and Stroud and whatever, but he still does it. And we also, I don't think we needed the scene to be as graphically described in the book as it was. That, again, felt unnecessary. Also, I don't understand either the author's intention of having like the forced rape here or the Undying's forced rape. Because like, if the end goal is pregnancy and you just want to force pregnancy on someone, then why not go for artificial insemination? Why not go for in vitro fertilization and then, you know, popping it into the womb? Like, they're advanced enough as a society. I know it's confusing, but they're advanced enough as a society that they have radiators, they have cars, they have lorries, they have cameras, they have radios. They have stasis chambers and magical X-ray screens. You're telling me you have all of that and you don't know how to do artificial insemination? You have to have women raped instead. No. Sorry, but this just feels like the author wanted a sick excuse to write about the main character being raped, and I do not like it. This didn't need to happen. This didn't need to be included. You could still hit plot points without having this happen. You could still have discussions of this without having this happen. I am getting like Handmaid's Tale vibes again here. The difference is Handmaid's Tale is never marketed as romance, and I'll be honest, it's been many, many years since I've read it, but I don't remember any of the rape scenes in that being either this graphic, there being this many of them, or the women who are raped falling in love with their rapists and it being marketed as romance. You know what I mean? In the next chapter, Stroud returns, and this time she drugs Helena and uses magic to control her body so that she can be raped again. Helena is then raped again on the page, except this time, thanks to the drugging, she could barely feel his weight. She wanted to arch up, press into him, even as an endless scream throbbed inside her skull. Her eyes snapped open and she stared up at him. She felt as though she'd never truly looked at him before. Now he felt very human to her. She wanted him to touch her. She remembered what his hands felt like, the press of his fingertips along her jaw. She craved it so much, her skin ached. The weight she'd been desperate to escape from that night before, she wanted it. Tears burned a hot trail down her temples. She hadn't thought it could be worse a second time, but it was 1,000 times worse. Now her body wanted him. It's sickening to read and write a scene like this, right? I'm shocked this got published. I'm shocked this won a British Book Award for a fantasy book. I can't. I don't know if I've spoken about this yet in the recording, but I'll mention it now. One of the reasons that I picked up this book and finally decided to review it now was because it did win this British Book Award for Best Sci-Fi and Fantasy Book. And it bet absolute legends like R.F. Kuang and Joe Abercrombie. Reading this now, I don't know how it happened, but I find it kind of insulting. This bet R.F. Kuang's catabasis, I had this struggle yesterday, didn't I, saying it? Which, like I say, it's my least favourite book of hers that I've read so far, but it was still fantastic. It was brilliant. It was miles above this slop. Joe Abercrombie, I'm not like overly familiar with a lot of his work, and I haven't read The Devils yet, which is the one that this book won over, that was also nominated. Knowing what I know about his other work, again, I don't see how this won over Joe Abercrombie. Even, what was one of the other ones? Rebecca Yarros's Onyx Storm. It bet that. And Onyx Storm was terrible. It was full of wasted potential and poor pacing, but it was still better than this. Plus it had cute talking dragons. It was better than this. It's R.F. Kuang I can't get over. That book is everything that this wants to be and more, you know? It's a thoroughly excellent book. It's got the quality of writing, the complexity of characters who are nuanced and dark and have their faults. It's got this beautiful mix of classical references, philosophy and logic, all integrated perfectly into this compelling plot. And you've also got this intriguing love story that's a little bit toxic, a little bit not, and you don't quite know if you want them together or not. And then you get this ending and you're like, is it a happy ending? Is it brilliant? I love it. It's complex. It's everything people say Alchemised is, except it actually is, you know? This is just slop in comparison. I can't. Sorry, I can't. When we're talking about, like, catabasis, like, and the love story and that, and how, like, it's a little bit toxic, the issues are things like they don't communicate properly, they don't think things through, they aren't open and honest with each other. That's where the toxicity comes from. Not he kidnapped her for months and repeatedly raped her. So anyway, this next rape scene is even more graphic and disturbing than the last, and I hate it. We also get the reveal at this point that before all of this, Helena was a virgin, because, you know, good guys, the Eternal Flame guys, were big on the whole purity culture nonsense, but only for girls. Girls. Literally. She'd always known of sex. In Etros, it was part of life, like birth and death. But in the North, sentiments were different. The subject kept rigidly behind closed doors. Boys could get into trouble for going to the entertainment districts, but it was considered an irrepressible part of their nature to hunger and a sign of their vitality, and so punishments were usually light, more of a consequence of being caught than for the act itself. The expectations were different for girls, even those allowed beyond the traditional confines of Palladian society. Lumithia was a virgin goddess, pure and gleaming. Women associating with her cult and the opportunities it permitted were required to be likewise. Helena's life at the Institute revolved around her scholarship, which in addition to being dependent on her academic performance, had included a morality clause. She'd adhered to it more devoutly than she would have any faith in greater terror of earthly consequences than divine threats, her fear stifling even the smallest potential spark of desire towards anyone. So, one, this was shocking for me to hear because I thought she'd been dating Luke, but apparently not, and that's becoming less and less clear, and I think in part 2 we realise, oh no, they were just friends. Bizarre to me. And And two, I'm so sick of books with this women should be pure and it's immoral to have sex nonsense, but men are allowed to get away with it. And I feel like if this book was critiquing that more overtly, that would be okay. And I'd be like, oh yeah, this is a great critique of that. That's a great but it just doesn't. At least not what I've seen so far. It bothers me. And also, right. Okay, here's a rant I want to have that I think I alluded to when I was filming yesterday, but I'm not sure. And sorry to bring this up so late, but it only occurred to me here in writing the script, right? Why are the Resistance called the Resistance when the Order of the Eternal Flame, who are the Resistance, were literally the ones originally in power? Surely the bad guys, the Undying, they're the Resistance, because the guilds resisted against the Order, and then the Undying joined with the guilds and fought the Order, and then the Order fought back, but somehow the Order are the ones called the Resistance. None of this makes any sense. They're keeping references in here to Helena saying and thinking things like rape is just a part of war. But I think the author wants us to be like, okay, this is a dark wartime fantasy, so there must be rape. But then using that as a precursor to romance just feels cruel and insensitive to the actual victims of rape, especially wartime rape. Does that make sense? You can show that, like, war is bad and rough and has these horrible consequences on people. But when you're like, hey, this horrible thing happens during war, but it's okay because they end up in love, that just feels like a bit of a kick in the teeth, doesn't it? Does this author not realize that stuff like this, like rape during wartime, is literally happening in the world right now? The bad guys in this book were based on Voldemort's supporters in Harry Potter, who were based on Nazis. And what we're seeing in the real world at the minute is a pretty huge Nazi and Nazi-adjacent resurgence. Women around the world are literally having their reproductive rights stripped back in numerous different countries. We're seeing wars, genocides, and therefore wartime rapes happening all the time in numerous countries around the world right now. And you're taking all of that suffering and pain, and instead of critiquing it and saying this is how we stop it, you're turning that into a romance story. You're turning it into a plot point for a romance where the wartime rapist becomes the love interest. I can't. It's so out of touch. Look, like I say, maybe this book will do a 180 and surprise me in the third part, but it's not looking good so far at all. Almost straight after this, so like immediately after the rape, Ferron leaves the house, he comes back, he takes a tablet of something, because he's taking tablets as well, although we don't know what they are. I don't think it's ever explained, at least not in what I've read so far. And then he rapes her again. So we've had a number of rapes at this point. Her body had anticipated it just as the drug had acclimated her to the house. It had attuned her to this. It was such a profound betrayal. She thought of shoving him off. If he'd physically force her, pin her down, or paralyze her, then she might hate herself less. But she was so tired of being hurt, and so she didn't move. When it was over, he left without a word. She didn't look at his face. If this was a book like The Handmaid's Tale, writing a scene like this, I might applaud it. But knowing it's going to end in a romance between them, I can't. Then some moon thing happens. Like, I don't know if it's like a solstice or an eclipse. I can't remember. I didn't write it down. Some event. It's basically like a New Year sort of thing, I think. And Helena doesn't get fed, so she goes to look for Ferron around the house, and she finds him in his bedroom drunk, where he backs her against the wall, wraps his hands around her neck, and forces a kiss on her, and then sexually assaults her. Yeah. It was a punishing kiss. The moment their lips touched, he crushed her body against his. The hand on her throat slid into her hair, tangling in the curls, gripping them tight as the kiss deepened, angling her head back so he could consume her. He kept kissing her, hard enough to hurt but not bleed, like a storm poured down her throat. When she was gasping for breath, he pulled away from her lips, kissing along her jaw and the side of her neck. His other hand curled around her waist. Helena stood frozen in shock, pliant and stunned in his possessive hands. So this is horrifying, right? Nothing about this says there's any consent on her part. He then undresses her against her will, and then when her body responds to his touch, she's shocked, and he stops and she runs out crying. I feel like the author is trying to make this like a, oh my god, her body responded and he did it for like more than just pregnancy, they're so into each other. No. Can we not? The fact that he's now doing this to her against her will, when it's not for the point of pregnancy, when he's not being coerced into it in this moment, he's not. He's just doing it for fun. Because at this point, she's not ovulating either, so he's just doing this because he wants to. That makes him an irredeemable rapist in my eyes. Sure, he was a victim in the other cases because he was being forced to, but he wasn't here. He just chose to do this. Irredeemable. And that thing of her body reacting, like, that's because she's been drugged. That's not her choice. She's not responding to him because she wants him, because she's consenting. She's doing it because she's been drugged. And even without the drug, even in like normal rape outside of this book, just because a body responds, that doesn't mean there's consent. It's an involuntary physical response. We don't control it. it. So just because someone might, have signs of arousal or even orgasm during rape, that doesn't mean it wasn't rape. I understand her being shocked by it. That makes sense for the character, but I can't help but feel like the author was trying to make it seem like Helena was actually into this, and I find that a little problematic. Yeah, okay, right, so I kind of went off script there, but like what I wrote in my original notes were, this is just another sexual assault scene, and we can't excuse him with, well, he was forced to do it this time because this was all his choice. And at this point, she's his captive, she's been drugged, so even if she did kind of want to consent to him, could she even do that? Because of the power imbalance between them. She's his drugged captive. Does she even have the ability to consent at this point? If you try and make it a romance from here out, knowing all that stuff, that just doesn't work for me at all. Trapped in Spyfell, she was latching on to any glimpse of kindness, any sense of tenderness her mind could fabricate. But it wasn't kindness. He wasn't kind, he was simply cruel. He wasn't as monstrous as he could be, and for Helena's fracturing mind, an absence of cruelty was sufficient solace. For her starved heart, it was enough. So Helena is traumatized. Anything she feels for him is not real. This is not healthy. Can we not categorize this as romance, please? Just because he wasn't as cruel as he could be, that doesn't mean he's good for you. I can't. Anyway, then, after all the trauma and repeated rape and everything, she panics and she's like, crap, I do need to get out of here. Maybe I can kill myself again. So she starts smashing her head against like the metal bars on her bedroom window. Again, this is not a healthy response to what some people might be claiming is a consensual encounter with someone. This is not healthy, just in case there's any doubt, Ferron, a rapist, enters her bedroom and his hand around her wrists let go and his palm was pressed against her forehead. No! It was too late. His resonance poured through her. It was as if she were a tapestry. He found the threads of emotion and ripped them out. He didn't sedate or paralyze her. It was worse, more violating than that. He took away all the things she felt, leaving her mind scrambling, trying to reconcile the dissonance. It was like the tablets, except he only used his resonance to keep her there for as long as it took until her body finally lost all the drive of those now vanished emotions. Can you not just let a woman have control over her mind and body for once in this book? Please. Just once. Just once. I can't. He's not just controlling, and the Undying in general are not just controlling her body and her uterus and her reproductive organs. They're now, they've always been controlling her mind too, and now they're doing it so casually, Helena acknowledges that she probably has some version of Stockholm Syndrome, you think. And then they have this big argument, and Rapist is like, the Eternal Flame people were just using you. And then Helena's like, wah, Luc was my best friend. So it became clear to me at this point, they weren't actually dating, they were just friends. This book is not clear about it though. And then blah, 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 I hate you. She storms out, he storms out, I don't know, one of them storms out, and then the next scene, oh my god, she's pregnant. Gross. Obviously, as you would be, Helena is distressed. Once again, I don't think this is fantasy or romance. I would call this a horror novel at this point and just torture porn, but maybe that's just me. That's the thing, if this was marketed as body horror, even like kind of feminist horror, to be look at the horrors of what war and men and misogyny do, I wouldn't mind it so much. But calling it romantasy and then having I can't. Helena starts screaming again. Yep, don't blame you. Fun fact for you, there are 159 instances of scream or screaming or some variation of that in this book, which means there is a scream every 6.5 pages. That's how much this poor woman is tortured. If you are playing the screaming drinking game, please be careful. Rapist Ferron appears and tries to stop her having a panic attack. First, while she's still screaming, just screaming in the corner, him and Stroud have a little conversation where she tells him she's purposely trying to torture Helena because she bombed the lab she used to work in and killed a guy called Bennett that she used to work with. Bennett gets mentioned a lot, in passing, but I've not seen him on page yet, but he's a guy who him and Stroud had a lab and they would do creepy experiments on people, and now he got killed because apparently Helena bombed the lab, and now Stroud is continuing experiments without him, and because Helena bombed the lab, Stroud hates Helena. But I'm confused because she didn't seem to know Helena at first. I'm not sure when she found out this information or put it, I don't know. I don't have a clue. None of it makes sense. They argue and Stroud went white, nostrils flaring. I worked at Bennett's side. My repopulation program is a farce, a convenient cover for the High Necromancer to achieve his ends and sate the endless appetites of his loyalists, Ferron sneered at her. So again, I'm confused. Is the brothel actually about repopulation, or is it to keep the stupid men happy? Or is it about creating magical babies that Morrow can put his soul into? But then if it's just about keeping the men happy as a brothel, then why all of this with Helena? Trying to get her pregnant? Unless that that was just to torture her. But if it's about the babies, then why'd you need the I don't know. I don't know. I'm so confused. And none of this makes sense. Ferron goes on and says, after you threatened to commandeer my assignation, I investigated your little project. You boast so freely to the papers, I was curious to see what remarkable data you must have to show for it. I was something of an academic myself once. Do you mind telling me about your controls? Or the statistics and historical data? No matter where I look, I can only find anecdotes in unsubstantiated newspaper articles. Things are still in the early stages, Stroud stammered, her face now a stark combination of white with red stained cheeks. I am legitimate. Your program is a spectacle. Ferron's voice grew low and taunting. Your lab assistants are better qualified than you are. Again, I'm confused, because if he knew all of this, and he knew, like, the program wasn't working or something, or he knew... I don't... Like, if he knew any of this, why did he go along with the rape? If he was going to be critical of it, why did he go along with the rape? None of it makes any sense. Ferron then kicks Stroud out of his house. He apologizes to Helena. He puts her to bed, and he uses his magic to knock her out again. When she next wakes up, he tells her, you are not allowed to hurt yourself or do anything that might cause an abortion or miscarriage. You'll be monitored full time now just in case your newfound desperation drives you to previously unknown heights of creativity. 1, miscarriage is abortion. It's literally called a spontaneous abortion, so saying miscarriage or abortion, you don't need to say both. And 2, you're still not letting her control her own body. Let her have control over her own body. Please, just stop. I hate this. I'm restricting you for your own good. I'm protecting you for your own good. I'm holding you captive for your... No, I hate it. Let the woman have autonomy over her own body. It's not that hard. If she doesn't want to be pregnant with your baby, she shouldn't have to be pregnant with your baby. He gives her a book about pregnancy, which is wild because she's literally a healer. Her parents were doctors. She's worked in a hospital. Why would she not know about pregnancy? Anyway, about the book, it's pointed out it was a medical textbook, not a housewife's guide that would have avoided technical and medical terminology in favour of the more accessible explanation of pregnancy. Can we not with this implication that housewives are, like, stupid and need things simplified for them, please? You really, really want to believe that, like, a housewife couldn't read a basic textbook on pregnancy. Stop it. Less of this, Helena's not like the other mother, she's actually educated. Oh, no, none of that, please. Anyway, now that she's pregnant, Helena, who made a point of telling us earlier that she never wanted to be a mother, is suddenly obsessed with protecting her baby, which is another trope I hate in fiction. This idea of, oh, child-free people will just change their mind if they just hurry up and get pregnant. No, stop it. Stroud comes back for whatever reason, even though she was kicked out before. I guess she has to come back because she's got something else to say and something to do with the plot. Even after being told she's useless. And she reveals, if the High Necromancer is correct, she's keeping the memories hidden by internalizing her resonance, which means she's probably been putting most of her energy into maintaining it. It might explain her lethargy, since it's unlikely that it's been done efficiently. Now she's pregnant, she doesn't have the strength to sustain both, especially if this embryo is an Animancer. The High Necromancer says that his power was so great, he claimed every drop of his mother's life while still in the womb, and was birthed from her corpse upon the funeral pyre. We'll have to be sure to maintain Marino. Perhaps if we're lucky, we'll end up with both a baby and the memories before she succumbs to the toll. Once again, women are just objects, right? Just womb conveyor belts that can be discarded after use. Helena closed her eyes. Now she understood. She was expected to die, and they'd all known. She only hoped it would happen too early for the pregnancy to be viable. I get where she's coming from, and I don't want to downplay a character's legitimate trauma, but at this point, we're like a third of the way through this book, and all Helena has done so far is scream, pass out, be tortured, be raped, and want to die. Why does she not have a personality? Why does she not do anything? Why is she okay to be like a passive object in all of this and just a passive victim? For all the agency she as a character has in this first part of the book, she might as well be, I don't know, a computer with a corrupted hard drive that they're trying to recover, or a test tube that they're doing in vitro fertilization in. I'd have the same response to that, but at least she wouldn't be traumatized. But seriously, if you can just replace your main character with an inanimate object and have the same things happening essentially, and it feels like nothing would change, then maybe you need to rethink your main character and actually give them something to do. Give them some values, some goals, some motivations. Give them some agency. Also, during this time, one of the dead maids in the house has been acting strangely, and Helena thinks she's maybe not a dead thing at all, but a corpse with a person's soul in it. So not a necrothrall, but a lich or something. I think it's actually Ferron's mum's soul in there, and she's not actually dead, and they're trying to hide her, but I could be making that up. I don't know, because she's not in part 2 at all from what I've read so far. But that there, with raped Helena being pregnant, that is where part 1 ends, and so that is where I'm going to end this video today. That was basically a book in its own right? I mean, obviously we didn't get any conclusions, but that was basically a book in its own right. So next video, we are going to be moving on to part 2, which takes place 4 years before the torture, rape, and pregnancy. So it takes place when Helena is around 21 or something like that, and it's just basically it covers the time she lost her memories. You know what though? I do feel like if this alone, this part 1, was a book in its own right, and we had none of the upcoming romance rubbish, and it was just a focus on a woman overcoming rape and torture after being a prisoner of war, I wouldn't be so critical. If they didn't try to redeem her torturer, I wouldn't be so mad. Even so, I don't think we need to see quite so much on-page suffering, especially the rape and torture. I don't think that needs to be so graphic on the page. This has been an entirely miserable experience to read so far. This has been 300 odd pages of just misery and torture with no purpose, no point. If they'd been more critical of these governance systems, if Helena had more agency, if she'd even just tried to fight back or speak up for herself once or twice, and then if we got like an arc of her, I don't know, like escaping and reclaiming bodily autonomy or something like that would be fantastic, and I wouldn't be so critical. But knowing where it goes into part 2 with the romance and the backstory and trying to redeem Ferron, it doesn't sit right with me, you know? Yeah, so in summary, we just got 280 pages of torture, no real development, the plot barely moved forward, definitely no character development for any of them. It was just, let's show a woman be tortured for almost 300 pages rather than telling a compelling story, and I'm just personally not a fan of it. I have read incredible books that aren't even 280 pages long in total and managed to do more in that time than the first third of this book did. Overall, the first part of this book is miserable and yet still a boring experience, and I would not recommend it, but I'm going to keep going and we're going to see how it gets better or worse in parts 2 and 3. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. So I know this has been long. Part 2, I'm afraid, is even longer, but part 3 is a short one, so hopefully we'll have a long video and a short video. I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with this whole video so far and coming on this very long journey with me. Let me know if you can make sense of this magic system any more than I can, because I think it's a bit of a mess, but maybe I'm stupid, maybe I've missed something. Let me know though if you have any good book recommendations for me, or any other bad books you want me to review as well. That's always fun. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you want to keep up to date with me and everything I'm doing in my life, I do have an Instagram you can follow where I post all sorts, from like fun days out with my friends to like actual photography projects I do. I've been photographing a lot of birds this year, which has been absolutely amazing, and I keep posting them on Instagram. I also post like books that I'm reading on my stories and other recommendations and stuff like that, so you can go follow me over there at Rachel Oates with a 0, or I do have Patreon and channel memberships, and I'm going to be posting a little behind the scenes vlog over there very soon, which is exciting. But for now, yeah, thank you for watching, thank you for being here. If you're new, it'd be wonderful if you want to subscribe, and if you've been around a while, just check you're still subscribed, please. That would be great. But for now, thank you, have an amazing rest of your day. I'll see you again soon. Bye.